Okay, so good morning to all of you. Everybody settled at the back? Okay, people online, good morning. Hope you're able to hear. Okay, so today we are gathered to discuss about a very important section of GS2, okay, that is international relations, right? And I'll also just initially tell you what is going to be the format and what are the sections we're going to cover. Okay, I think you were able to see, etc. Right. Now I think some of you people who are from the YouTube, you may have been. आपको दिख रहा है? ये रुक जाओ. Better है? Yeah. Achha, how many of you have your first class today? You're starting with IR today? Okay, ठीक है. So I'll just take a moment to outline how we carry along in the VAJRA classes. People who are there online, maybe who are watching this class for the first time, few things that I'll tell you, right? The format that we have here is let's say this is going to be a day-long class, right? And if you see the document, it is again I think around 60 pages odd document. So you know the exact. I wanted to say 50 around document. Up. अच्छा. Volume आप थोड़ा increase कर देना. अच्छा, at the back, are you able to hear me? Yeah, you need slightly more volume. More, okay. ठीक है. Is it better now? But I think चलो ठीक है. Hopefully it is better. Okay. So there is, let's say, the main objective here is we'll cover the entire breadth of IR, international relations, and when we see IR in GS2 mains, you will see 4 questions. 2 questions will be 10 markers and 2 questions will be 15 markers, right? Now major challenge is then how to cover IR. Some of you may have done your foundation classes maybe a couple of years back. Yeah, maybe you've not done it yet. How to cover these topics, how to ultimately write answers. So all these things integrated in the syllabus wise format, we'll be doing it, number 1. So here the main thing is that not only do you have, let's say, a document with you which effectively summarizes major themes that are there, but we will be going to value add. We'll be going to brainstorm and discuss various points, okay, within the document itself. I'll be asking you questions which either can be based on previous year questions or they may have their own variations, right? How many of you have seen the paper of 2025 mains, especially for IR? Have you seen questions? Okay. So in GS2 in general, you will find the language of the questions slightly typical. This also you may have felt for some questions of polity. You may have also felt the same for some questions either of governance and even in IR. Okay, this year there was a particular question on the East versus West conflict. Last subject question at 20 marks, the question number 20, that is 15 marks. Fine. So how to tackle such questions in general? Should we only go by a bilateral approach? For many students, IR is, let's say if I've done India, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, India X, India Y. Is that sufficient to answer? In the recent times, no. Okay. Couple of questions you will be able to do, but some questions you may not be able to do. Then that means what are those themes, etc. So that also we'll explore today, and how to be able to answer such questions. That is one. Fine. So here there will be maybe some quotes or some keywords, things which I'll tell you. You can write them in your document itself. And for some themes, etc., we'll also be doing brainstorming. And for when I start some topic, maybe I'll also draw a kind of a mind map that covers the breadth of the topic. Okay, those things you can draw and you can at least make a jotting off. Okay, that should help. That is there, right? The second thing is when you these classes, right, with this, of course, it's a high packed class on that day. But what you do after that also is important, which means you should take out time after, let's say, maybe after every section, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours to revise this also. Because right now it's a high impact environment, all of you are competitive, everybody has to complete this subject in one day. So you are naturally motivated, but the moment you go back, let's say, next day, other days, etc., if you do not revise IR or any of these subjects, because it has specialized vocab, okay? A lot of things are there, if you do not do them, it will not make much sense to you 3 months, 4 months down the line, fine? And a culmination, a ultimate checkpoint for you, that after you do the classes, are you able to attempt and write the questions or not, fine? So mains mein, our ultimate test is not only the understanding of course is very important, but equally important aspect is writing part of it, right? So that is something, and we will be seeing some previous year questions for some of the sections as I go along, okay? So that is there, and in case, let's say we are discussing a section, you have maybe seen a PYQ, maybe you are not very well sure, you can again ask it here in the class also, or perhaps even later we can also discuss that, okay? This is going to be the format, okay? So we will begin one by one discussing, and we are talking of IR, international relations. The very first thing we'll do is just have a look at the syllabus, what is mentioned in the syllabus, okay? Now, of course, the syllabus tells you India and its neighborhood. In almost 30 minutes from now, we will delve into India's neighborhood, okay? What is state of India's neighborhood right now? Is it absolutely calm? There's huge turmoil, okay? In fact, there have been recent, of course, we know the protests in Nepal, the Gen Z protests. And not only that, what is happening, let's say, with Pakistan, okay, you should not say, nahi sir, we are playing the Asia Cup. Hum to matches khel rahe hain, sir, everything is going fine. But beyond that also, we saw a crisis in Sri Lanka in 2022. We also say a turmoil in Bangladesh after fleeing of Sheikh Hasina. Okay, so basically, we'll also try to analyze what is happening in neighborhood and what can India do about it, okay? And keeping in mind the big China factor. Although in the recent times, the relations with India and China are slightly better, but one of the reasons why is it better is the unconventional, I can say, the policies of the man who says MAGA. What is MAGA? Making America great again. So we'll also see that, what is happening here. And the moment I say MAGA to you, okay, MAGA is what? Making America great again. MAGA has elements of nationalism, true or false? Yes. There was a question this year in GS2 on nationalism in IR, that how nationalism is taking its roots. And by the way, this question or this theme is not of this year. Even in Trump 1.0, we saw huge elements of course, he did not say the word MAGA, but of course, Trump 1.0 was talking of America's first policy. And is it only specific to America? That is also not true. Even in EU, in certain countries, there is a rise of far-right parties. They are also being extremely nationalistic. They will, of course, say deport the refugees, right? So we will see that economic sentiment, nationalism, how that is leading to deglobalization also, as we do, let's say, the policies and politics of developed and developing countries. Fine. So we'll see neighborhood. There are bilateral. What is meaning of bilateral? Between two countries, okay? There are regional and global groupings. Any example of regional grouping that we know? Chalo, somebody said SAARC. Can I also say BIMSTEC? Okay, ASEAN, okay? Region specific hai? Any global groupings that we know? Chalo, theek hai, somebody mentioned G20. Okay, right, we can say. And there is an expansion going on even in case of G20, EU, sorry, not EU, AU. African Union recently became member. Similarly, BRICS is becoming BRICS Plus, right? So we are seeing some certain changes. And then the question is, this year there was no specific question on any of these groupings specifically. But now a question can be, what is going to be the impact on the world? And in all these groupings, for us, one of the most important groupings will be BRICS. In fact, if we only go by Twitter, you know, somebody is very active on Twitter, one of the presidents of a country, right? And if you go by, let's say, the tweets of Donald Trump, especially with respect to BRICS, he has been very vocal of, or he's been vocal against BRICS, okay? All talks of de-dollarization, and again, his favorite, let's say, method is sanctions. Kuch bhi ab karoge, sanctions, yeah, tariffs. How much tariffs are there with India? 25, and then additional 25%, right? So we'll also see that how these groupings and dynamics are happening. So it is not as if that US only dislikes, let's say, part of a grouping. There are fundamental reasons why is this happening, right? So today we'll also unpack that, fine. Agreements involving India and affecting India's interest, fair point. Then effect of policies and politics of developed. This is more important for us, okay? And especially in the developed nations, you are seeing the rise of, like we saw, nationalism, the whole hue and cry against globalization, right? That is one. And second, politics of developing countries on India's interest. Anything that comes to mind, why this is mentioned? Sri Lanka. Or socho, developing countries may in general, what are their concerns? Political instability, anything else? Chalo, +1, chalo, we can talk about how trade related policies are there. Right? Ab dekho, when I say developing countries, has India been a voice of the global south? Yes. And why would we say so? P5 nahi, kuch aur? Chalo, one of your friends has mentioned NAM, non-alignment movement, okay? And of course India is one of the founding members of NAM, right? And right now main thing is, see, concerns of developed countries are different from developing countries. This topic again gets reflected here also and here also. It means India's leadership role in WTO. Not only that, what are we doing in NAM? What are we doing in BRICS, etc. So developing countries, for example, can have their own groups, जैसे कि L69, G77, and this ultimately you can also have a sub-theme known as the global south. Developed countries versus developing countries, and there's always a huge divide between these two. Okay, this also becomes important for us to know. एक अलग से topic mentioned है Indian diaspora. Okay, so this also in general in the recent times we have seen a huge focus on Indian diaspora, right? This year there was no specific question, but again a specific question can also come, is also in your handout. We'll also see that. And lastly is international institutions, agencies, forums, their structure and mandate. Okay? Now, in this, of course, one of the most important institutions will be United Nations. Okay? But right now, if I were to say UN is facing its biggest crisis, would that be correct? And what is that crisis? That UN is not able to prevent wars. Is it able to prevent wars? No. So many kinetic and non-kinetic conflicts are happening, number one. Okay? And many a times it is said it has a biased role. Yes? Within UN, if you are talking of principal organs of UN, you have United Nations Security Council. वहाँ पे क्या है? Veto. So P5 cannot function democratically. That's a challenge. So UN has its own challenge. But if you take any other body, okay, this body wala section be in the last we'll be taking, but let's say if I were to talk about, let's say, these bodies or let's say institutions, so we already know that UN has its own challenges, right? But if I move ahead, WHO has its own challenges. This was seen in the COVID-19 pandemic, wherein WHO refused to call it the Wuhan virus. Okay, so there was a bias towards China. Is WTO facing a challenge? What is that challenge? Main thing is, the biggest body here, the topmost body is Dispute Settlement Board. And in this body, the appointment is pending because of US. The appointment is stalled in the, let's say, the topmost decision making body. The WTO in general cannot function. This is one issue. Other issue always is there is developed versus developing. Even this is a challenge. If I move into other bodies, etc., So you will see sometimes they ask you a question on, let's say, IMO, International Maritime Organization. So sometimes these are not that well known, because generally, let's say we talk about UN, but in general, or even I'd say, ab ho sakta hai in the recent times they may ask you about ILO also, because the nature of work, jobs is also changing, etc. So this section is also largely driven by current affairs that you will see, fine. And I can keep on adding some elements to it, but in general, we'll get to know what is happening. I can even add, for example, Paris Agreement, etc., etc. But you are saying, and we are saying, chalo abhi ruk jao, I can also add. Okay. UNHCR, etc. USA moved out of these bodies very recently. USA also moved out of Paris Agreement. Yes or no? So when I see this section, I will again see the rise of nationalism. For example, America First policy, and this whole section we will club again into a big theme known as, theme is multilateralism, but the issue is decline of multilateralism, seen in the fragmentation and dysfunction of most of the bodies in general. Yes, these bodies are not able to work very well. When you understand these bodies, in fact, इसमें चलो अगर add और करना है, तो दो बहुत famous bodies, World Bank, IMF. What is the issue in these bodies? There is a bias towards the Western, right? Promote Western. In fact, even when the bailout package would be given by IMF, right? So there are also a lot of conditions, okay, to counter them. देखो, ये है, these are the bodies that you see. The same issue is then to counter them, there is again a talk by BRICS, NAM. They will talk about reformed multilateralism, right? So G4, I'll take it here separately. BRICS is there, NAM is there. We also have right now SCO. For example, if I say BRICS, BRICS has things like New Development Bank, Contingency Reserve Arrangement, which is directly a counter to World Bank and IMF. Fine. So what you are seeing below is the rise of Global South and the rise of developing nations, and they do not believe much in the multilateralism offered by the West. So there is this whole clash that is also going on. This is also something. Ab isme they can pick anything. If they pick BRICS, they don't want to just answer about BRICS. They want you to answer also about the issues in IMF and World Bank, right? Similarly, if there is an issue of WHO, okay, maybe Trump reducing the funds of either UNESCO or WHO, the question that will be asked has to talk about the issues of multilateralism. Okay, so agar aap jab tak in bodies ko, if you only see them in isolation, we'll be not able to paint the whole picture. Yes, so this is again how we'll be proceeding. Till here, are you able to follow? Okay. Now, let's move ahead and we will start with the very first section. The first section for us is Foundation of Indian Foreign Policy. And then, of course, we go into the India's neighborhood. The section, almost I have made 5 sections. This is generally what we'll follow. One is Foundation. Foundation, may we'll be doing objectives of foreign policy. We'll be doing continuity and change of foreign policy. Okay? And we'll also be seeing just a snapshot of India's neighborhood. And then I directly move to India's neighborhood. Okay? In the neighborhood, of course, we'll be starting with China. Then I go to Nepal, because Nepal is very much in the news. And then, of course, we go to Bangladesh and other countries. This we'll cover. After that, of course, we see bilateral relations beyond neighborhood. When I say beyond neighborhood, there are, of course, greater powers, great powers. अब यहाँ पे आप सोचो US, Russia, EU, Japan. But we will also see middle powers, for example, overall case of, we'll see Middle East, Central Asia. And we'll also see the case of Africa. right? Regional and global, I've told you the format in which we'll do. What I will do after I complete India's neighborhood, I will directly jump to 3 groupings. One is SAARC. There's always a question whether SAARC is alive, SAARC is dead. Second question, what is the use of BIMSTEC? Okay. And secondly, because of issues in Bangladesh also, now the new question is, even is BIMSTEC able to fulfill all the demands of the regional integration? Take, wo dekhenge. And isi mein we'll also go to India's Act East policy and we'll talk about ASEAN. Okay. And later on we'll go to the global groupings, especially G20, BRICS, SCO, etc., etc. And the last section for us is the institutions of international governance, which again, broadly speaking, I'll talk about UN, but we'll also have a framework to tackle any other institution if that is the case. Okay, yahan pe bhi we'll also see NAM, we'll also see the case of reformed multilateralism. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Now somebody I think in the starting had asked, and that is a very relevant question, कि international relations are very dynamic in nature. So how relevant is this class going to be in 2026? ठीक है, काफी सही question क्यों है? I'll also tell you why. When I had taken this class in June, okay, India-US relations were very different. India-Nepal relations were very different. Okay, the specific जो अभी SCO की meet हुई है, that had not happened. Okay, so the reality is, yes, IR is dynamic. There are going to be changes. Okay, especially in the last 2.5 months, we have seen huge changes. Okay, nobody expected, let's say, the whole range of protests in Nepal, number one. Secondly, nobody would have expected that India would be, let's say, slapped with continuous tariffs back to back. Although that may change, right? But there will be certain shifts. Now, for us, how to use the class, number one is, when you go through this, you will get a very broad understanding, okay, of all the major themes that are happening. That is number one. Second, till now, most of the updations will be there in the handout. Yes? Now, when we give the exam, okay, just in that time, maybe 6-7 months, whatever is recent and whatever is transformational. Current affairs mein, in IR, there will be 2 types of changes. One is incremental. For example, we know India, US are doing very good in defense. They have a lot of deals, all the 4 agreements they have signed, okay. But maybe a new deal has been signed. That is an incremental change. But something very important is known as a transformational change. Just say, for example, 1 year back when we used to do India-Bangladesh relations, and when Sheikh Hasina was in power, the relations were very different. Now, after fleeing because of political instability, the relations are different. Yes or no? So in case of transformational changes, of course, we have to change our lens of analysis. We have to change the way we understand that particular topic. So to a large extent, this would help you. But again, that said, current affairs have to be updated, right? So I think that should help. Okay. So we'll begin now. And we begin directly talking about the very first page of your document has 2 things. And whenever we are doing, let's say, Indian foreign policy or let's say IR, it is important to know what is the word going through right now. Then you can locate India, then we can see our position, then we can see our perspectives. The very first topic that you are seeing is word in the 21st century. Okay, and just after that, I'll tell you, the word is going through a lot of shifts. Okay, now this one single page, okay, gives you almost the whole snapshot that is going to come throughout. And these points will be relevant across your GS answers, right? Of course, in IR, this is relevant because this is going to cut across many points. Now, a lot of these points are from the speeches of Dr. S. Jaishankar, prominent experts, and this covers a lot of points, fine? And this will help you, by the way, बहुत बार question economy भी में आता है. In GS3, the question may be that, for example, if the question is, let's say, related to manufacturing, global value chains, supply chains, in global value chains, supply chains also IR is there. Now, for example, if Russia-Ukraine conflict happened, it led to changes in food supply, fertilizer supply, right? So energy supply, etc. Fuel, 3 Fs, food, fuel, fertilizer. That also impacts your IR, that also impacts your GS3. So you will see this back and forth one by one, fine? So I'll go through them, I'll give you certain examples for each of them if it is not very easy to understand. So first is, this will give you a snapshot, and when you are seeing this, also imagine the word map at the back of your mind, okay? And slowly by steadily we'll also have a continent wise thinking. जैसे मैं आपसे नॉर्थ अमेरिका बोलूं, मे बी सम पिक्चर कम्स टू योर माइंड, साउथ अमेरिका, लैटिन अमेरिका, अच्छा ओके ब्राजील में ये इशू चल रहा है, राइट? So slowly and steadily we'll try to have a thematic thinking in that sort. Okay. Word in the 21st century, first point is US, and if you are new to the subject, IR may, of course, I will also be using certain terms which are specific to IR. Okay. So if there is any term which you are not able to, let's say, grasp fully, kahin likhte jao. During the breaks you can ask those terms, okay? But make a list of at least certain important terms. Just say, for example, when we do India, China, I will be making a mention of, let's say, Middle Kingdom complex, kuch aise terms jo newspaper mein bahut commonly aate hain, right? If you add it to your answers, even in GS2, I'm not saying even for pol science, political science. Right now, if you see people who are scoring 130 odd the marks in copies, etc., people are using some important terms that you see here and there. So that is not prohibited if you use it. Fine? चलो इसको देखते हैं. पहला पॉइंट क्या है? US, and for us we should understand all the points. That is the basic idea. ठीक है? Word in the 21st century. US unilateralism under America first policy. We are seeing this under Trump 2.0. I can mention MAGA, making America great again in this case. And whenever I say, let's say, word in 21st century, please remember, word hamesha is in a state of flux, which means the word is constantly changing. If we would have taken this class 10 years back also, some new change, some different changes would have been there. So word will always be in a state of flux, okay? So number one is US unilateralism under America first. Now, any direct consequences of that you see? हमने बोल दिया अमेरिका फर्स्ट पॉलिसी. वेयर आर वी सीइंग अमेरिका फर्स्ट पॉलिसी? टैरिफ्स और कुछ? So just a couple of examples we'll see, okay? And because it is 21st century, it is slightly broader. One of the biggest examples of America first policy was seen सबसे पहले after US withdrawal from okay, so US withdrawal, one example, and we'll try to have multi-dimensional examples. Similarly, I can say America first policy, again USA moving out of Paris Agreement or let's say UNESCO, etc. This can be an example. Bilkul, that can also be an example. So couple of examples we'll write. Tariff वाले सारे examples यहाँ पे shifts में है, तो वहाँ पे मैं tariff के examples I will write it separately. But at least some of the examples that you can see. Unilateralism. What is the meaning of unilateralism? One-sided. Normally you want a dialogue, okay? That there are two parties, whatever parties are there, they collectively take a decision. So unilateralism is just like you have not consulted anybody, आपने अपने हिसाब से decision ले लिया, okay? And of course US can always justify. आपने सुना होगा foreign policy, etc. Or main thing in foreign policy. What is foreign policy? Relation with other nations. What is the objective of foreign policy? Simple, just one keyword: national interest. Okay. The objective of foreign policy, of any foreign policy, is protection of national interest. While the name is foreign, it is not only foreign. Foreign policy includes domestic concerns also, and also outside international concerns. Uska reason kya hai? How can foreign policy influence domestic politics, or let's say domestic concerns? Globalization. Okay, good. Or any right. And for example, see, domestic issue also, because people from India will also go outside. Your remittances can be impacted, so that is an economic angle. Your people can come into your country, can go outside also. So movement of people, goods, ideas. So whenever I say foreign policy, a common misconception is foreign policy is only external to your state. Not necessarily, right? And there are, for example, इसका example भी देता हूँ मैं आपको. For example, our foreign policy with Sri Lanka, okay, also has a factor of Tamil Nadu. Yes or no? So foreign policy can never be only foreign in nature. That is one thing you'll remember. Which is why America's unilateralism also impacts people within the country and people outside. So let's say when it tries to cut back the jobs, it does not, let's say, give visa, etc. So that can also impact America internally also and all the countries externally also. Okay? So just a term for you to know. Second, rebalancing of global economy. Okay? The rise of China and India. Is this happening? Yes. In fact, China's rise has been tremendous. Post World War II, that is there. India is also rising. And if any power is rising economically, its weight also increases. Okay? So there is a rebalancing of global economy. This is seen. In fact, it is said both these two countries, China and India, have been huge beneficiaries of globalization. And US and specifically Trump has also highlighted that China has benefited from globalization, but China has not given back to other countries. So globalization has only one side benefit to China, which is also why you see the trade wars. So there is a rise and, let's say, balancing of global economy. Third point, equally important, there is a return of old empires. There is a resurgence of Russia, resurgence of Iran, Turkey. All of these you would have seen in current affairs. Now when I'm saying Russia, right, at least 2014, annexation of Crimea happened. Second, Russia also, for example, right now what is happening? Russia, Ukraine conflict. Now this also tells you that Cold War mentality is not over. How many of you know what is Cold War? What was the temperature of the world in Cold War? Of course, it is cold only because there was no direct conflict or escalation. Okay, right. So what is the Cold War aspect here? It was an ideological warfare, right, between two blocks. One was USSR, which was talking of which ideology? Communism and liberalism purported by US. The fight was there, right? So there was a Cold War mentality. Even now you see the fight still going on between US and Russia. Right now we see a Cold War 2.0 between US and China. Okay. Abhi very recently when this SCO summit happened in China, so Xi Jinping has mentioned this statement: we should get rid of Cold War era mentality. Again making a reference to USA. Okay. So there is a return of empires of Russia. There is again Iran. We'll also see Iran today. So you see the rise of Iran. For example, what is happening in Iran? Chalo, they are going for nuclear enrichment. Just like we are doing mains enrichment, what are they doing? Nuclear enrichment. Okay. So we also see the conflict between, we'll also see a Shia-Sunni conflict, right? We'll also see Iran-Israel and Iran-Israel-US conflict. Okay, there are multiple angles to this. And even in case of Russia and Turkey, all these were prominent empires way back. All of these have big global aspirations. They're also growing, not just economically, but they also want to bring more weight and more influence to their region. That is the main point. Fine? Now, one of the most complicated regions right now in the world happens to be Middle East. There's a huge geopolitical flux in the Middle East. Few things that you see. Number one, of course, and when I say 21st century, so there was a huge crisis in Syria, right? Afghanistan, we know Afghanistan, right now the takeover is by Taliban. Reign of terror, terrorism by ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Any other thing that you see in Middle East, apart from things that are mentioned? Ab yahan pe, of course, we can talk about the whole conflict. The moment you bring the Israel angle, more conflicts. Abhi chalo recent, the bombing that happened in Qatar also. So when I say Israel, so of course Israel, Palestine, sometimes known as mother of all conflicts. Other than that, then you can bring in the Iran angle, etc. and there are many powers involved. Here you see the rise of proxy wars, right? In fact, if you see the growth of terrorism, again the whole battle between US and USSR is also there. How they controlled, let's say, Afghanistan, and when they moved out, this again led to huge terrorism. Okay? Now, Africa is again getting more prominence in the 21st century. It was called the lost continent, is called now the continent of hope. Have we seen the rise of Africa in the recent times? Kaise? Chalo, we can say African Union mein G20 was inducted. Okay? Anything else? China? Not exactly disengagement, but chalo, there are some things happening. Other than that, dekho, I'll also say, when I say continent of hope, okay, especially India. Now, when India used to engage with Africa, India used to only engage with certain countries, okay? Jahan pe, when let's say we could have engaged with Nigeria, okay, perhaps South Africa. So we were not looking at Africa as the entire continent, but only certain rich countries which were rich in, let's say, resources. But now India also sees this as a huge continent of opportunity. Okay, both of them see themselves as partners. Okay, so in that sense, not only is it an important for India, but even China, for example, its Belt and Road Initiative, China is also having a lot of inroads. Okay, Africa mein, in your prelims, many times a question is asked on DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. DRC has almost 80% of world's cobalt. Okay. You have rich other minerals in Africa, so again a lot of fight happens because of this. Huge market, right? Chalo, air bases, etc. And then the whole aspect of maritime, right? Because of piracy can also be a threat here, right? Yahan pe, when we say Djibouti, the Horn of Africa, so China's naval base, and then you bring in maritime security, maritime diplomacy, this also becomes important. Okay, this is one. Other than that, you see technology, connectivity and trade. इन 3 dimensions को जरूर याद रखना. आपको ये बहुत आसान points दिख रहे हैं, ठीक है? Technology, connectivity and trade. I'll tell you, just the theme of this line has been asked this year twice. How? This year there was a question on India-Africa digital partnership. Fine. Africa is one theme. Technology. Technology mein the most relevant theme is digital. Now India has, of course, there's a lot of countries adopting UPI. Right? India is also again improving its digital governance. आपने सुना होगा digital public infrastructure, DPI. Right? So technology, and this part is very important. Technology as a part. So यहाँ पे digital you can write separately. This is one. But this is not the only part. In technology, you can talk about even advances, let's say in, chalo, AI can be one, okay? Semiconductor, space, science, so there are many things. Digital is a very prominent part among all of this, okay? And specifically, जो हम technology की बात कर रहे हैं, जैसे when I say EU पे we have a lot of collaboration in terms of technology. US, a lot of cooperation. आपने सुना होगा NISAR, NISAR, Artemis Accords. So the terms that I'm mentioning right now, you will also see these terms throughout when you prepare for prelims, right? That is what you can bring in. When I say connectivity, is connectivity important in the 21st century, right? And the moment I say connectivity to you, keep in mind Belt and Road Initiative. Which country is prominent for Belt and Road? China. And Belt and Road Initiative is China's infrastructure project, having road component as well as the maritime component. But the issue is that can also have strategic ambitions. China can always put in military to safeguard its investment, wo challenge hai. So which is why globally every country and basically the major blocks, they are also having their own connectivity initiatives. So as I will move along, I'll tell you things like IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, ये एक example है. Africa में India and Japan have something known as AAGC, Asia Africa Growth Corridor. Okay, so new lines of connectivity are being explored. Connectivity also helps. And the last is trade. Trade सुनने में बहुत अच्छा लगता है. Everybody likes to do trade, but the problem is, reality में, what is the issue with trade? Trade deficit. Fine, because countries will have tariffs, and don't be surprised when you think that USA is putting tariffs. Within South Asia, the countries have huge tariffs between themselves. That is why South Asia is one of the one of the least integrated regions of the world. So within South Asia, बहुत कम trade हो पाता है. Tariffs are very high. Fine. And when I say trade, also bring the aspect of globalization. And with trade, even this point is connected. If there is good connectivity, would you have better trade? Yes. But if you bring in the dimension of conflicts, for example, India and Pakistan right now are in a, let's say, stage of conflict, let's say. So India cannot use trade routes. So what does India do? India tries to develop, let's say, Chabahar port to bypass Pakistan and go to Afghanistan. So connectivity can also be used as a tool to bypass conflicts, look for alternate routes. So in that sense, these three terms are very important: technology, connectivity, and trade. New notions of power. Then climate change is a factor. Based on this theme, 2 or 3 years back, there was a question on IMO, took many people by surprise. What is IMO? International Maritime Organization, right? So Maritime Organization, one of the main aspects, it also deals with the emissions from ships, the movement and navigation in the water bodies. International Maritime Organization. उसमें भी छुपा dimension क्या है? Climate change. And whenever you are stuck in any of the themes, technology में आपको समझ नहीं आ रहा, connectivity, trade, climate change, anything, one dimension you have to think is developed versus developing. The moment you think it, automatically बहुत points आएंगे. For example, whenever you do climate change, you read climate change, have you heard about CBDR? Common but differentiated responsibilities, right? Things like, for example, net zero. The targets for India, the targets for US will be different. Capacity for these countries are different. Yes or no? So this is one aspect. And now when I say climate change, even you know that USA moving out. So if one of the biggest historical emitters is moving out, what does it mean for the other nations? Will we be able to achieve the targets? So this is also one. Okay? So this of course is a factor contributing to geopolitics amongst others, etc. Arctic passage here. And for example, some of the ice of Arctic is melting. And this means more nations are more interested to explore that area. Even this is a new dimension that we can talk about. Yes or no? So that is the few things to see here. Word in the 21st century. An extension of this topic is nothing but the shifts that are happening in the world. Okay? A huge list of points are here, which covers almost everything. Some of the points can also be slightly overlapping. We'll also have a look at it. Okay? यहाँ से शुरू करते हैं. Let's start with globalization and deglobalization. What is globalization? Chalo, I can say it is the movement of ideas, goods, people. Anthony Giddens may say this is compression of time and space. Yes? तो जो भी definition अपने को पता है या सुनी हुई है, at least you should remember what is globalization. Okay? Second term that is mentioned is deglobalization. ऐसा क्यों होगा? Why? The biggest issue, whenever globalization is there, see, globalization has led to, of course, better movement of ideas, goods and people. But with globalization, the biggest issue is it has led to rise of inequalities. The big, right? We can always quote the Oxfam report. And this rise of inequality is not just happening in developing countries, it is also happening in developed countries. So protest against globalization is happening both in developing countries also, in developed countries also, right? Developed countries में क्या protest होगी? Indians are taking away all the jobs. Yes? Yeah, Indians and Chinese are taking away all the jobs. but nobody is saying that they are able to work at the wages that you will not be able to work at. Yes or no? And the ऐसा तो है नहीं that the people or the countries of the companies of the West are doing any favor of giving away all the jobs, right? It makes economic sense sometimes to give certain projects, or let's say outsource certain projects to India because of the competitive rate. But chalo, let's take that aside. So one issue is there is increasing inequality. Another issue is, of course, the issue of job loss, right? अब ये जो है, जो actual economic issues हैं, these can be exploited by political parties, right? And this is again where the moment you bring in, because of this economic / political nationalism, right, this becomes very popular. So it is not just Trump who is saying MAGA. अगर आप और भी जैसे यूरोप में, I'll talk about many leaders, Mare Le Pen, Julian Bolsonaro, okay, there are many such leaders and parties, जैसे AFD, there's again a very far right party, right? So what they will say, they'll also say the same thing. Outsiders को बाहर भगाओ. They are changing the demography. We are losing our jobs. There's a rising inequality. Yes. In fact, one of the reasons why Brexit happened is also because of the increasing issues. The people of Britain in general felt that they were not getting enough benefits by remaining in European Union, right? So this is one issue, which is why deglobalization is happening. And the maybe last एक और point मैं भी बोल सकता हूँ, that according to US, China has its own version of globalization wherein China takes the benefit, but it does not give the benefit to others. China will dump, right? China will copy the designs, but it is not going to be integrated. It will not open all its markets to the other goods. So which is again why, and this mounting discontent ultimately led to US-China trade wars. So ये theme है very important. Globalization is important, but right now what you are seeing is deglobalization. Fine. Now a very important term that has become important in the terms is mini-lateralism. Any idea what is mini? Now, earlier, for example, let's say you have WTO. WTO talks about all the countries, right? सारी countries एक साथ है किसमें? WTO में. Minilateralism means maybe 2 or 3 countries come together. They make their own group or they make their own block. For example, you have the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. Earlier, इसका पहले एक नाम था NAFTA. NAFTA was then changed. It became USMCA. Again an example of a minilateral, which means big blocks are transforming or giving way to smaller blocks. Same cheese, instead of WTO, you have ASEAN that has become more prominent. Yes or no? So minilateralism also tells that there is an increasing dissatisfaction with the existing bodies, which is why countries are making their own. So हो सकता है वो 2-way, 3, 4 countries come together, they make their own organization. Okay, that is, let's say, the rise of minilateralism. Then there are tariff issues, yes or no? We can talk about India. We can again talk about US-China trade war in this context. These are 2 separate topics, we'll see them very shortly. Other than that, the world is also planning to go for clean energy transition. Okay, you see terms like decarbonization. And these terms also dictate the relations between 2 countries. जैसे clean energy transition is a very important part of India-EU relations. Okay? चलो EU से हम CBAM की बात कर सकते हैं, but अभी के लिए I am writing just India-EU relations. Climate change as a dimension it becomes important. 2 themes to remember here. One is the issue of developed versus developing, which is where you should remember CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities. First issue. And whenever climate change is there, you have to follow that recent, अभी COP29 हुई थी in Azerbaijan, Baku. The next one is supposed to happen in Belém, Brazil. Okay, so then we'll see. But it will talk about, so climate change or environment in that sense is not merely a topic of environment. It will have its reflection in IR as well. Okay. So this is one. So we will again have a look. And main issue in climate change, see, climate change, does it impact developed and developing countries in the same manner? No. And in that I can also bring the element of SIDS, small island developing states. Agar sea level rise hoga, they are under the threat of getting submerged, yes or no? Even this can be a challenge. So this is one issue. Other than that, there is a technological transformation going on, which means digital, which means fourth industrial revolution, the rise of AI. You tell me, how does this impact international relations? Kaise? How come? Diplomacy to is a keyword. Okay. So data privacy, I can take this point. Anything else? A very similar topic was asked to you in 2021 essay. It was almost along the lines of technology and geopolitics. Cyber. हाँ, this is a good example. Deep seek जैसे आपने बोला, इससे पीछे क्या आएगा? China, OpenAI, US. Then this also becomes a technological warfare. Whose model is better? Okay. चलो इस पे I'll just make a connection. देखो, during Cold War what was happening? Yes. And if I talk of in terms of technology, at least in terms of military race and space race was going on for both the camps. One of the reasons why NASA was able to launch its program was because Sputnik, USSR had already done it. So then the then president of USA had mentioned कि एक साल के अंदर I want this to be up, and NASA said this cannot be done. It will take us a lot of time. But then finally they were able to do it within 1 year of the launch. But if I say Cold War 2.0, when I say technological shifts, and if I bring in USA and China, one good example, let's say you can say somebody, let's say OpenAI or all of this, not I'm saying it is only USA, but other than that, there's a huge fight for semiconductors, yes? Semiconductors, rare earth elements or rare earth minerals. In all these things, so there is a, when I say Cold War 2.0, again the aspect of technology. Who leads? Achha, who leads in semiconductors in the world? China या कोई और? Taiwan. And when I say कोई और, you will say, नहीं sir, Taiwan is a part of China. But this is then the whole conflict that is happening. So that is also one. ठीक है? Okay. Rare earths. Who is the leader in rare earths? China. Okay. So again, not only is it happening in the case of, let's say, AI, in semiconductors, rare earths. So it is also said the countries who lead in technology, ultimately they shape the global power relations. This is why this becomes important to us. Okay. Social media apps से ज़्यादा, मतलब social media of course you can say नहीं सर सारे लोग TikTok पे हैं. बिल्कुल बिल्कुल वो तो रहेगा. इसे military मैंने बोला. That is already there. That is already there. I will also say, for example, China is again getting huge leaps in quantum computing. Okay. So what you are seeing, that USA is only doing a trade war. छुपा क्या है पीछे? This is also a hidden component. That the leaps China is making in quantum computing, rare earths, semiconductors, and also military and space is a cause of concern. So which is why if we are able to break down the terms, तो अपने लिए technology क्या है? सब कुछ, including nuclear, including digital, the aspects of space, all of these factors, you should be able to expand on it. Now a term is mentioned, modern warfare. What is modern about warfare right now? Hybrid. ठीक है. Information warfare, I'll take this point. So how many of you had seen this year's essay topic? Second topic याद है? Sun Tzu का quote. But the best way to fight, the best way to win a war, subdue your enemy without fighting the war. This is a quote of Sun Tzu, Again, you know who is the leader of this? China. Information psychological warfare. Any other aspect of modern warfare? Technology. Even if you see the Operation Sindoor, and if you compare it with Kargil, what is the difference that you see? So drones is one. Other than that, and huge reliance on air power. Earlier there was a huge reliance on army, and when air power is to be used, think of coordinates, right? अब हमें live coordinate चाहिए हर चीज. So not only that, better coordination between the three services. This is also why we say of theaterization of commands. Okay. So modern warfare includes many things, which includes information warfare, psychological warfare, which again becomes an element of hybrid warfare. But even then, cyber ho gaya, etc. But reliance on air power. Okay. And how that changes the modern contours. Abhi bhi right now, if you see the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it is going on back to back. आप रोज सुनते हो new drone strikes. Okay, अब तो now almost drone strikes have become synonymous with normal day in the life. Drone strike हुई, अच्छा ठीक है, ये तो सुना है हमने, ठीक है. Same thing, let's say if it is happening in Middle East, okay, back to back missile strikes, drone strikes, this and that, okay. Then again you see, अच्छा 5,000 missiles have come. Iron Dome is able to almost neutralize 99%. Still some of them have, let's say, come and hit. Okay. Okay. चलो नेक्स्ट आता है काइनेटिक. व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ काइनेटिक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स? ये टर्म सुना होगा आपने. व्हाट इज काइनेटिक एनर्जी? एनीथिंग दैट इज मूविंग. एंड व्हाट इज पोटेंशियल? स्टोर्ड स्टैटिक. So conflicts where there is any movement either of troops, missiles, etc., that is known as a kinetic conflict. Okay. Non kinetic क्या हो जाएगा जब movement नहीं है? Cyber type का conflict हो जाएगा non kinetic. Okay. Terrorism and radicalization, ये सारी जो themes हैं, this you will see across IR. Okay. Terrorism, what does, when I say terrorism, you can think of, ठीक है, let's say Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, etc., etc. And when I say radicalization, the issue is not just with radicalization, the issue is also with increasing online radicalization. Okay, we have seen the instances of youth in Kerala finally getting caught, okay, because of being, let's say, online radicalized. Proxy wars are there, right? Any example of proxy wars? Okay, somebody has mentioned Hamas. So remember the 3H. So for example, when I say the proxy wars, the best example is Iran supports the 3H. One is Houthis are in Hamas is present in and the point we are saying is these are proxy wars. So it is funding them, supporting them, they are fighting or attacking, let's say, Israel. So Iran is not directly attacking them. But of course we also saw direct confrontation between Iran and Israel, and then later on USA also intervened. This is known as a proxy war. Okay. Now, space warfare and militarization. And by the way, if you see all these points, don't you think the modern security also has to be reimagined? Yes, that is why in the recent times countries again have to spend a lot of money on defense and military budget. Iske liye, if you see SIPRI publishes its report, right? Is India also buying a lot of new weapons in general? India is, right? This also creates an issue, especially this issue is for developing countries. So when we do India's neighborhood, सबसे बड़ा issue क्या है? If your neighborhood is unstable, you have to spend more money on defense rather than development. And this is always a trade-off a country has to choose. Yes? Proxy wars हो गए, space warfare and militarization, because again it is said the new domains of warfare are not just land, not just water. They can be digital, which means cyber. They can also be space. So for example, if a particular operation is happening and we are locking in the coordinates GPS, what if our satellites malfunction for even 10 minutes, the operation can get compromised, yes or no? So space warfare militarization is an important part. Another important part, because also of this issue, is also the issue of refugee and migration crisis. इसके साथ एक आप term सुनते हो, xenophobia. Xeno जो term है, that means foreigner or outsider. Phobia means fear, fear of the outsider. Xenophobia. So whenever I say EU, I say certain right parties, far right parties, etc., they will always invoke xenophobia. Okay, and this leads to a refugee and migration crisis. Refugee crisis is very particular in Middle East, because Middle East is unstable. The people will move out, they may go to Europe, and in the recent times, especially after COVID-19, Europe is also now sometimes shutting its borders. It is reducing the inflow of refugees, right? You also have heard about Rohingyas. From which state? Rakhine state of Myanmar. Okay, that also leads to this migration crisis है. Issue क्या है हर जगह भाई? Limited land. Okay, demography imbalance हो सकता है. There can be security threat also. Yes, this is a challenge. Now, another important point, something that we saw during COVID-19 also is weaponization of supply chains. अब ये जो term है ना, weaponization of, this is a keyword that you can use again and again. Okay, so for example, if I write अब देखो weaponization of, for example we wrote, what does it mean? जैसे for example whole world was dependent on China. Especially for this aspect, it is now famously said, when China sneezes, the whole world catches cold. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? China is deeply integrated into the whole system. Okay, that when China sneezes, the world catches cold, which means, and second thing is, supply chains में if there is a huge China influence, the moment China is impacted, or let's say China does not want to trade with you, everything will go for a toss. So especially because of this point, you see the rise of alternate supply chains. There is something known as supply chain resilience initiative. Especially USA, India of course talks about now Atmanirbhar Bharat. One reason is why to be dependent on China in general. So this is why आपने सुना होगा China plus one strategy, right? That is what you create an alternative. तो यहाँ पे एक, these are some strategies, let's say, to deal with over reliance, over dependence on China. This is weaponization of supply chains. I can also say weaponization of, example बताओ. Good. Best example जैसे कि blood and water cannot flow together. Yes, and this is just one example. Water के case में somebody has also mentioned here dams. अब यहाँ पे India China aspect can also come. Yes, on Brahmaputra the dams being created, right? Now somebody also mentioned the good case of South China Sea. We'll also see today 9-dash line. China claiming all these areas to be its own, right? China always gets a dream, है ना? कि almost 1000 years back this land was our own. That is why we have created certain artificial dashes and this belongs to us. Anything else which can be weaponized? हर चीज जो आप सोचो. Any of these things. So you can use these keywords in your exam, right? Weaponization of space in general. So that is what space warfare, right? Digital arena is what? Cyber warfare. And weaponization means you make it as a tool. Normally water was used for cooperation, now it can be used for conflict. वैसे बोला भी जाता है, the next wars will be water wars. People living in Patel Nagar can also, and these areas कि हर चौथे दिन पानी शॉर्टेज होती है, right? So you can also, weaponization of water can happen, right? Supply chain, water, space. Any other example that we can give? चलो tariffs भी ठीक है. So that is weaponization of trade, which means tariffs, trade wars. Data, bilkul, data can also be one. Because when I say data is the new oil, what if you blend that oil with something? ठीक है, ठीक है, बिल्कुल हो सकता है, बट रेयर अर्थ को वेपनाइज करने से मतलब इज दैट यू टेकिंग फ्रॉम सप्लाई चेन पर्सपेक्टिव, वैसे ही जाएगा, ठीक है, सप्लाई चेन. लास्ट है इरोजन ऑफ इंटरनेशनल लिबरल ऑर्डर. इनफैक्ट जितने भी सारे पॉइंट्स हमने देखे, दे कैन बी अ क्वेश्चन इन देमसेल्व्स आल्सो. You have many examples and points to prove them. The last point is erosion of liberal international order. Okay? And when I say this, any examples? How is a liberal international order getting eroded? Okay, और कुछ? देखो, जैसे आप देखो ना, liberal international order. Who was supposed to uphold this? UN. Okay? Just after World War II, UN, of course, पहले था League of Nations, this became UN. So number one, I can see this in the erosion or decline of UN. Okay? And UN क्यों? Because there is the rise of conflicts. UN क्यों? Because the problem of UN Security Council, ECOSOC, इसकी जितनी भी bodies हैं within UN, even UN Secretariat is seem to be very biased. Okay? Limited budget, जो issues आप governance में पढ़ते हो, the same issues are also with UN. It takes a long time, bureaucracy, etc. Those are issues. But of course, other issues is it is not very functional. You can cut its budget. Okay, the countries can wield power on it. That is one. Another example can be decline of WTO. तो जितने भी institutions हमने देखे, those be it WTO, WHO, etc. Okay, and a big supporter of international liberal world order was US. US itself is declining in that sense. Earlier what used to happen, just after World War II, US used to put in a lot of money. आपने Marshall Plan सुना होगा. In Marshall Plan what they used to do, basically they used to give money for the countries to adopt liberalism, and in exchange US will do development. But now what is happening, even USA is also withdrawing back. The reason is also can be many of these factors. अब ये बताओ, are you able to understand this? So this is just one page, but in just one page there are many underlying currents that you see here. This is happening, and as we move along, we will be touching upon many of these points one by one. ठीक है? People online till here, are you able to? हाँ, चलो, near shoring, friend shoring, all of this is related to mini-lateralism. Have you heard these terms? Near shoring, friend shoring. Right? So you have very small selected groups where you are doing trade, etc. So it is not following the liberal order in that sense. Right. In fact, yes, one point is also important, I think, which is not here, but you can also write it, is shifts maybe नहीं तो एक one challenge is COVID-19 या pandemics. Okay? In fact, in his book Pax Indica also Shashi Tharoor writes them as problems without passports. Which also tells you issues with globalization. लोग move कर सकते हैं, right? So one of the problem without passport can be because people are in general moving, you cannot stop the movement of people, which is why pandemics now have a huge, very easy chance to spread very fast. Problem without passports. हाँ, same thing, climate change, pollution, things which do not know borders, etc. That can be mentioned here. ठीक है? Is that fine? Now keep this at your backdrop, and especially this will be more relevant when I move into the great powers and other blocks. Fine? Now we will have a look at Indian foreign policy, some basic points, and basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to make space then for India's neighborhood. Okay? अब देखते हैं. When you see India's foreign policy, fine? What is foreign policy? A basic definition is there. What is the keyword we are looking for? National interests. So what is foreign policy? It is strategies, decisions, actions directed towards the external world, etc., aimed at promoting national interest. You would have heard things like US has no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. This is nothing but only a word play on this only. So main चीज क्या है? National interest. Okay. Second, a derivative of this only is what are the objectives of Indian foreign policy? आपके हिसाब से what will be the objective? Sovereignty, one. Second, of course, your territory. You have to safeguard territory, your people. Third, think of your prosperity also, which means the trade aspects. This also you will do. Other than that, chalo, peace, fine. Take care of your diaspora, good. Development is a part of the economy. तो ये हुआ. उसके बाद क्या है? There's always a case that people want to be respected. They work to be recognized. Okay. So which is why we also fight and we also want a claim to, let's say, United Nations Security Council seat. So India also has aspirations to be known as the global great power. Yes or no? All of this in some ways or the other will be your. So if you go through, just देखो इसमें simple points हैं. Territorial integrity, sovereignty makes sense. International peace and security, yes. Do we have a similar DPSP? ठीक है, yes. So you can link it to India's DPSP, right? Enhancing security, ये तो हमेशा ही रहेगा. And this also tells you how international relations and internal security are also related. So even when we do India's neighborhood, उसमें काफी component हम overlap करेंगे किससे? Internal security से. Security, safeguarding national interest. Last में again diaspora, and last point is advancing the global standing. What does this mean? Saying, right? So right. अब इसीलिए that is why in the recent times also you see, for example, starting में we were one of the founding members of NAM. Later on also BRICS में we have again a strong voice. It is said voice of the global south. All of these things make sense. Fine. So, and why are we seeing objectives of Indian foreign policy? सवाल ये नहीं आएगा, question आएगा ही नहीं. What are objectives? Question आएगा, what are the continuity and changes in Indian foreign policy? Right? How, and then you can use these objectives in terms of continuity. So whatever government will be, they will ensure all these things. So just remember these to be your goals. These are your ends. The means can be different. Yes. And we will see, जब भी हम बात करेंगे what changes have happened. So it's not as if Indian foreign policy has changed. Our means to achieve the goals have changed. This can be true. For example, अभी थोड़ी देर में we'll see when look east becomes act east. Main focus फिर से वही है that we want to have more outreach to Southeast Asia. But example क्या होगा उसका? That now you have more engagement with them, right? So please remember whenever we say objectives, ये हम इसलिए कर रहे हैं so that you should know what are overall the end goals of Indian foreign policy. And this will be same generally, yes or no? We will not say कि नहीं protecting diaspora cannot be. अभी government change होगी, diaspora को protect नहीं करना है. This will be there, just that different governments may have different ways to do that. So this heading helps you also, right? If there is ever you are stuck with a point, let's say the question is what are the changes and right? तो वो भी इसी से बना लेंगे, है ना? Okay. Now, phases of Indian foreign policy. Dr. H. Jaishankar, now basically in 2019 he had given a speech in which of course you don't have to remember when he had given the speech, and he basically talked about the 6 phases of Indian foreign policy, right? So what we'll do a quick review of this. This will also help us see what events have happened in the past, etc. And then I'll move to continuity and change in the policy, and then we'll see the emerging world order. Okay? Now, if you ever get a question of 15 marks, this can be useful, right? Now, the very first phase is, and the phases are made in such a manner that you will be able to understand. क्या है year? हाँ, 1947 से 62. What is 62? And this is known as the phase of optimistic non-alignment. Fine. Now we'll see something important about it. Pehli baat to, of course, India was the founder of, one of the founding of NAM. Second, this phase is also known for Nehru's idealism as seen in Panchsheel. Of course, Panchsheel is also influenced by Buddhist principles. Again, here the talk initially was Hindi Chini, bhai bhai. So focus kya hai yahan pe? Bahut, we were very optimistic. And again, remember, India had just gotten independence. The main core concern here for India was development, yes or no? And this was the main concern for India, that development has to happen, fine? And militarily speaking, security wise speaking, we were very idealist, but we were not very practical, we were not pragmatic, okay? This was a scene that was there. Other than that, we were there in NAM, we again took part internationally also, okay? So India again helped. जो North Korea and South Korea का dispute also happened during this time. India played a key role in the mediation of that. So internationally, we were playing a good important role, okay? Internally, we were focusing on our development, okay? And we also know your 5-year plans will also start from here, right? And there was Nehru's idealism, but the main issue ultimately came here in 1962. What happened here? Okay. So with China, again a proper conflict we had. And with China, we will see that how borders still remain one of the contested regions. In the recent times, there has been some disengagement, but still borders remain a challenge, okay? So that is the first phase, which is phase of optimistic non-alignment. Now, can anybody tell me what is the meaning of non-alignment? Not taking sides. So when I am saying this part, जैसे हमने यहाँ पे देखा, Cold War is between two blocks, US and USSR. So the policy of non-alignment here through NAM, these nations say we will not choose any sides. In fact, US के अगर आप ally बनो, who are allies of US? Who are also, let's say, part of, and main point here is allies are those who help militarily in defense, specifically by giving troops, fighting for a common cause. So India has always maintained we are not an ally of any country. We will be a partner. Partner or ally में main difference आ जाएगा. The ally, of course, in the case of USA, etc., they will take part in, they are a member of NATO, number one. They will take part in military related affairs. So that is what we have maintained. With NAM, there are two things. One, non-alignment, not choosing any of these two sides. पहली चीज. एक और टर्म आप काफी बार सुनते होंगे, strategic autonomy. Talking of strategic autonomy, what is strategic? Anything that is long term and security oriented. Whereas एक और टर्म सुना होगा आपने, tactical. Tactical is short term. Fine. In IR, almost with every other word, there is a tendency of people using strategic. ठीक है? Strategic escalation, strategic dehyphenation, strategic this and that. I'll tell you so many times. ठीक है? Strategic autonomy means, or you know what is autonomy? What is autonomy? Independence, freedom, ability to make my own decisions. And it is strategic. Why? Because you are not forced to choose any of the sides. आपको कोई चाहे side choose नहीं करनी है. Because if you choose between the side, if you choose USA, it means you are against USSR. If you choose USSR, you means you are against USA. Again, there is a huge conflict because of this. Yes, the points which I'm saying have to be added. Okay, so iske liye there would be no separate dictation. Okay, so security oriented. They are security oriented. So the keywords we are writing here, only some short points you have to write, because see, this is slightly the historical evolution. Okay, this is for only our understanding, so that we understand how Indian foreign policy has evolved over certain years. So I'll be only telling you some major events. Okay, for the students, let's say you will do this in more detail also in post-independence, and people with, let's say, PSR optional, you do this in more detail. Apne liye for IR, for GS, if we just know that in which phase, what is the thing that stands out, that is more important, because again, a question that will be asked is more on this aspect. Sabse last mein, that how has Indian foreign policy evolved in the last 2 decades, for example, or in the last decade. तो ये हमारे लिए ज़्यादा important रहेगा, ठीक है? But just for our sake of understanding, we should be aware, right? So whatever points I'm writing or explaining, you can write that down also, ठीक है? This point I'll also take up, कि while India used to say we are non-aligned, but in 1971, India will sign a treaty of peace and friendship with USSR, and we also had reasons to do so. So which is why the people outside in the West, they used to say that India, while being a member of NAM, is not a real supporter of NAM. Okay, वो भी देखते हैं. Till here are we clear? 1962. Now in the second phase, this is a decade of realism. What is the meaning of realism? Being pragmatic. So idealism है पहले आपकी, right? But now we see the world does not operate like that. Fine. And then you have a decade of realism and recovery. Recovery, why? Because one, you are recovering from the conflict of China. And then what would happen in 1965? Indo-Pak. And what will happen in 1971? The Bangladesh liberation. So years भी ऐसे ही हैं, आपको आसानी से याद हो जाएंगे, right? So in this, what we see that, of course, Indo-Pak, which ended with the Tashkent Agreement of 1965. One is there. Second thing we also see here is the liberation of Bangladesh that ends at 1971. Now, if there are back-to-back conflicts which a country faces, naturally its policies, development will take a backseat, and especially during these times, India did not have any food security, and we were forced to import grains under the PL 480 scheme of USA. Okay, this also happened, and it is after this event also we again ushered Green Revolution. Okay, MS Swaminathan, Norman Borlaug. तो यहाँ पे इस decade में हो क्या रहा है? That the Indo-Pak, we already had Indo-China conflict, and the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971. Now, in both these events, in general, India did not get any support from USA. Fine, and especially because of its security scenario. Okay, with Pakistan and also with China, 2 neighbors at your front. So India looked forward to have closer relations with USSR. So 1971 also sees that we will sign a treaty of peace and friendship with USSR. Treaty of peace and friendship. Fine. Which is why sometimes the argument is made that then why, if we were non-aligned, why did we get closer to Russia, or let's say closer to USSR? From Indian sense, from a security point of view, that made sense, right? That is one thing. तो यहाँ पे क्या है? Treaty of now 71 से 91, of course, big span. The Great Indian Regional Assertion. What will happen? Your 5-year plans and specifically Green Revolution will help tackle the problem of food security. Another important point that will happen is Pokhran. ठीक है? तो Pokhran 1, this will happen in 74 और 98 यहाँ पे आएंगे. तो Pokhran 1 happened. This is also an assertion of India's autonomy. This happened here. Other than that, we were focused on our development, and during this time, from first phase to the third phase, this is the entire time of Cold War. At the backdrop, Cold War is already happening. US and USSR are engaged. One of the reasons why USA and USSR could not help India much was Cold War was already there, right? So this is one of 2 important events. In the internal scheme, there will be a change of governments that you will see. There will be imposition of emergency, etc. That will be there. Then the governments will change. But from an IR perspective, slowly and steadily, there will be more focus on development. Okay, everything would look good, but around 1989 to 1991, what will be? So two things will happen, two substantial things. One, India will face its balance of payments crisis. Second issue that will happen is disintegration of USSR. So India's friend, long lost friend, in this case, the moment they get disintegrated, and the moment India also has a BOP crisis at exactly at this point of time, next point of time is becoming very crucial for India. Okay, so two major events. One is balance of payments crisis. Okay, and second is the disintegration, which will start almost in 89, is going to culminate here, right? So even this is a challenge that you will face. अब क्या होगा fourth phase में? One is India is forced to look outwards. India will adopt something known as LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization and globalization. LPG reforms India will adopt, first thing. Second, when we do this, of course, at this point of time, when we are looking outwards, we'll also try to look and establish relations now with Southeast Asia, even with Israel. So especially at this point of time, we are now looking outwards. Earlier, we were only looking at USSR. Fine? And because we've adopted, अब क्या होगा? LPG, what is the meaning of all the three terms? What is liberalization? चलो, market open कर रहे हैं. Privatization. So earlier what used to happen, there was of course license Raj. The government was taking or having all the ownership of major entities, yes. Privatization, so what we are trying to do? Private sector. And why are you bringing the private sector? ऐसा क्या है important? Private sector is more efficient, yes. So by the logic of efficiency of bringing them, right? What is globalization? अभी हमने देखा, compression of time or space or ideas, goods, people. Fine. We're bringing the ideas, goods or people to us. Now, this is there. So India is now looking outwards. One, we have had LPG reforms. Fine. Second, you are trying to establish relations with Southeast Asia, and this is where the look east policy will take roots. Okay. Relations with Israel in 1992 and onwards, we will try to have them. Okay. And then what will happen 1998 में exactly? Pokhran 2. Pokhran 2. अब इसमें भी there is a lot of politics between Pokhran 1 and Pokhran 2, which I'll just explain to you in a moment. I'll first complete this section. उसके बाद I'll just tell you on the nuclear front what led India to ultimately have the nuclear tests and what happened as a consequence. ठीक है? Fifth phase आता है हमारा 1998 से 2013. Now this is one phase which will see some important events around the world. Fine. यहाँ पे I think the space is less. I'll write it here. You can write it in your document. 1998 to अब देखो first तो 2000 there is a .com bubble. The markets will crash, okay, because there's a huge issue because of this. 2001 there is 9/11 terrorist attacks, and this will tell to the world the rise also of non-state actors. And specifically ये जो है 9/11 is a huge moment. Why? This will also tell you that US is not the sole power. So this will lead to decline of US hegemony. What is hegemony? Power, yes, power ultimately to control and influence people. ठीक है? This will lead to decline in US hegemony. Other than that, especially during this time, okay, chalo India पे 2002 we had parliament attacks, okay, that is there, but other than that, this was a period of economic growth for India. Up 2008 में many things will happen. One, of course, is 26/11. Okay, there is the mortgage, yes, the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Okay, this is known as the subprime or the mortgage crisis. While this crisis affected almost all the countries, India was not much affected. And the credit goes to also the supervision by RBI. Right? So this RBI, so this did not impact India much. And one more thing which happened here, we were able to have the civil nuclear deal with US. This is also known as the 123 agreement. And especially after 2000, and in this phase, you see how relations between India and USA will take a very good upswing. And from 1947 to 2000, the relations between India and USA, there was hardly any defense. There was very minimal trade that was happening. But post 2000, there's a huge shift in India's relations with US. Okay, so what has happened here, of course, I've given you certain points. One is India has a lot of economic growth, and India's economic growth is not also much impacted by the subprime or the mortgage crisis, the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. There is 26/11 attacks on India, okay, Mumbai attacks, terror attacks, and India is able to sign the 123 agreement with USA, okay. And it is during this time, because of India's phenomenal growth, and not just India, of course, China is also growing very rapidly during this time. So this is also seen globally as the rise of Asian century. Asian century की rise क्यों बोली जा रही थी? Because of rise of China and India. Of course, Japan is also rising, that can be made. So overall, this was a good phase, but there were some things that stood out. 9/11 attacks, 26/11 in general. हाँ हाँ, क्या बोला? अच्छा, .com bubble is .com, the internet bubble, which means there was a huge hype that this will do as well. In fact, people also right now say कि जो AI की hype है अभी, it is also the kind of .com bubble. So when a bubble bursts, though, this led to a huge, let's say, crash of stock markets. That actually happened here. And 123 agreement is the civil nuclear deal. ये क्यों स्पेशल है? Normally USA signs such a deal, or any other country signs, if you are a member of NSG, you are a member of NPT, okay? Without being a member, we were able to sign this deal. And similarly, we have had similar nuclear deal with Japan also. Although Japan के साथ काफी time लगा, because in Japan, you know, they have a more peaceful, they don't spend much of the money on military, etc. But we were able to sign this with Japan also, okay? So that is also a good step in general, and again a lot of credit goes to the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh for this. ठीक है? The two major events, and lastly, of course, you have the sixth phase, which is known as the phase of energetic engagement. Okay, this phase we will do when I do this heading, continuity and change in Indian foreign policy. In the change, I'll talk about the phase, let's say 2014 onwards. Fine. Ab. Just I'll also tell you about the Pokhran 1 and Pokhran 2. So let's say if I'm talking about nuclear, may we talk about things like nuclear, many of these things. Now, of course, India had taken, so Pokhran 1 happened. Now, how many of you are aware that there are two things, there is NPT and nuclear proliferation treaty, and then one is nuclear supplies group. ये जो NPT है, what is the idea behind NPT? Who can have the nuclear arms? It divides the word in nuclear haves and have-nots. Who are the haves? The main issue is it divides the words into haves and have-nots, which means who have the nuclear weapons, who don't have it. Who have it? इनके हिसाब से, right? And they say that those who don't have it, they must try to ultimately reduce. What is the issue in this? It is fundamentally discriminatory. Okay? There is no credible, verifiable way to reduce the nuclear weapons. In fact, there have been instances, there's in North Korea, initially became a member and then it withdrew also. Right? So the issue is, main thing is, it tries to assert the dominance of P5, and P5 is what? Just World War II related colonial power structures. Yeah, World War II related power structures. World War II ke samay P5 was the most strongest. So this is the challenge. So India first of all does not agree with, and India calls this as discriminatory. First thing. Second thing, there are few things which India said that even without being a member of NPT or NSG, India has a moratorium, self-imposed moratorium. What is a moratorium? Again, it's simply a voluntary thing that we have done, that we are not going to enrich our weapons, and whatever we are going to do, it is only going to be used for civil, okay, peaceful purposes. Now to control these nuclear weapons, a couple of things I'll tell you. So of course one is NPT, NSG hai, aur bhi hai. Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Even this is there. But India has also said we will also not be a part of this. Kyun? Isme bhi loopholes hai. This also has loopholes. Because countries can also do deep tests, okay, underground tests, sometimes to evade this. So while the name is Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, it does not totally address the problem. Second, India also says that when you already have NPT, when you already have NSG, why are you creating more and more treaties? This will only add to the confusion. Fine. And main jo issue hai India ka is division of word into nuclear haves and have-nots. Second, the haves do not give any timeline, any verifiable mechanism to reduce the nuclear weapons. वो तो अपनी stockpiles बढ़ाते जा रहे हैं. But they want the others to reduce them and be hopeful that they will also do the same. So the main issue is the haves don't give any timeline. Okay, so there is no verifiable mechanism, वो भी issues हैं. Which are the concerns which India has? So for example, when we had conducted Pokhran 1, this also was an assertion of India's strategic autonomy and be able to use energy, etc. for peaceful civil purposes. And it is said that India crossed the nuclear Rubicon. It's, आप ऐसे सोचो एक तरह से ना, the nuclear Lakshman Rekha we had crossed. Because finally when we had done these full-blown tests, now everybody knew that we were a de facto nuclear power. But इसके भी consequences होंगे. जैसे ये हुआ, then what happened in the neighborhood? Pakistan. Okay, so now when you are a nuclear weapon state, but you also have two other neighbors which are nuclear powered, which are China and one is Pakistan. So that also means, and this is what happens when the security conditions and scenario, because see, India already faced the 1962, 1965, 1971. So there was always a case that we have to arm ourselves. Yes or no? So this was again a challenge. So ultimately the tests were carried out. And since then, the whole trajectory security-wise of the neighborhood has changed. Now in the neighborhood, you will have 3 nuclear-powered states. One of course is Pakistan, one is India, and one is China. तो इसीलिए अब जब भी कोई conflict होगा, whenever Operation Sindoor was carrying out and was going out, every other day आप सुनते होगे, will this lead to a nuclear escalation? And India always maintained that we don't have any ambitions for escalation. We only want to de-escalate, but it is dependent on the other party. Okay, and we also had mentioned the term, we said no to nuclear blackmail. Okay, abhi dekhenge when we do India Pakistan. So this is just a reference. I'm telling you that what is there with Pokhran 1 and Pokhran 2 was in the news in general because of the whole Operation Sindoor and its aftermath. Okay, right. Acha, difference between realism and idealism. Dekho, idealism is what? You expect cooperation between countries. Okay, realism is what? The countries can also fight. It means idealism kya hai? That India and China, let's say right now, have very cordial relations. और हम इतने खुश हो जाए हम सारी की सारी फोर्स वहां से हटा के कहीं और मूव कर दे. दोस्ती है. That is idealism. Realism is, I know you can bite me anytime, but right now you are acting very good. You are my friend. ठीक है, दोस्ती है, but not at the cost of security. So I will still have heavy security force on my borders, yet maintain good relations with you. That is realism. Okay. So that is a perception difference, and that is also how. So I hope, is that clear? Realism or idealism? So realism in this case also, more military expenditure happened in this case. Okay, so your security and threat perception will also change as a consequence. Now, US foreign policy, is it driven by idealism or realism? Realism, right? Aap socho, despite having very good relations with India right now, especially very good relations on Indo-Pacific against China, yet they pursued a policy of tariffs. And same they do with China. They have a lot of rhetoric against China, yet USA does a lot of trade with China. That is real. That is realism. Okay. Any other doubt? Okay. Now let's come to this continuity and change in Indian foreign policy. Ab dekho, what is going to be continuity? Can you tell me? Bas, objectives. Objectives will be same. Change kya hoga? How to achieve those objectives. Yes or no? So here that is why we've done it. So continuity means what remains true. You still want to safeguard your people. You want to protect your diaspora. You want to have peace, security, stability, territory, sovereignty. All of that will remain same. So in continuity, basically just remember the objectives. So agar aise sawal aaya bhi, let's say, right? For example, if I were to ask you, how has Indian foreign policy evolved in the last 75 years? अब सोचो कैसे लिखोगे? या तो phases में लिख सकते हो, नहीं तो सबसे बेस्ट है हम changes बताएंगे. We will mention that the objectives are this only, but the ways to achieve the objectives have changed. From idealism we move more to realism. इसलिए बहुत बोला जाता है, from Nehru's idealism we have moved on to more practical, more pragmatism. Fine. Now, if I go to changes in Indian foreign policy, there are few points which I'll tell you. ठीक है, क्या changes आए हैं? And I am more focused on the changes, let's say in the last 10 odd years. Let's say number one, changes में हम क्या बोल रहे हैं? देखो, the term that is used is energetic engagement. Fine. This is most visible in number one. Let's say in the economic sphere. One by one, we'll see points. Now, in the economic sphere, especially with India, do you see the rise of FTAs? दिखता है हमें? More and more FTAs. What are FTAs? Free trade agreements. This is happening. Second, we also see the more and more rise of other trade deals. Very recently, you would have heard about the India-UK trade deal. Another trade deal which just got concluded is India-Japan trade deal, huge trade deal. So I can give examples with many countries. So economic sphere में पहले क्या हो रहा है? So trade deals है, more and more business meetings. So economic diplomacy is also becoming an important part. Yes? One is on the economic sphere. Second, if I say on the strategic sphere, we see evolution and better defense deals. Ab defense mein best example can be US, and when I say defense mein USA, you can also have. So what exactly are you doing? Defense में आप क्या कर रहे हो? Diversification. Yes or no? पहले क्या था? Over reliance on Russia. Now what is there? Diversification. Even diversification can be a part of realism. that if you put all your eggs in one basket, that is what? Idealism, right? So there is a diversification that is being seen. Okay, so you have proper defense deals. Second, चलो change में तो मैं Indo-Pacific अलग लिखूंगा. Or anything in the strategic sphere that has changed? अच्छा ठीक है. So here, for example, I'll come to this part also. So one is you will have better military coordinated exercises. The frequency of that has increased. Strategic sphere में जो defense deals है, military exercises of late have increased. Then one big change, you will see this as a separate point, is the focus on Indo-Pacific. ठीक है, good point. Double taxation avoidance agreement, that is also fine. अब Indo-Pacific जो है हमारा, right? अब इस in this Indo-Pacific, of course, the threat, common threat is China, right? And here we have a lot of cooperation in terms of defense also, in terms of economic also, and even in terms of cultural. All these three are happening in the Indo-Pacific. Okay, other things that have changed in Indian foreign policy, for example, Look East has become Act East. In any policy there will be three important components. याद रखेंगे, किसी भी पॉलिसी में तीन चीजें होंगी हमेशा इंपॉर्टेंट. एक क्या होगा उसका? स्ट्रैटेजिक कंपोनेंट, एक इकोनॉमिक, एक cultural. What is the meaning of cultural? People to people ties. What is economic? Again, how many trade deals we can do? Okay, business meets, investments, connectivity. And strategic means even the defense part of it. So even with the countries of South Asia, Southeast Asia, we have proper defense exercises. Indo-Pacific में you have Malabar exercise, for example. Yes or no? तो you will have ये common चीज हमेशा रहेंगी. तीन, कुछ भी नहीं याद आए, तीन dimensions: strategic, economic, cultural. We are working on that, right? We are improving that. Other than that, there is a more focus on diaspora. Diaspora was already a focus, but now more focus. I can give examples. आपने सुना होगा Namaste Trump, Howdy Modi. Okay, and not just this, across. So there are new events, diaspora को focus. Other than that, Pravasi Bharati Divas getting a lot of focus. Okay, so you will remember some of these examples. PBDs, Pravasi Bharati Divas. Raisina dialogue is not just for diaspora, but again, Raisina is conducted by ORF and MEA. Okay? So it's a think tank, and with that think tank, we again have extended dialogue. So वहाँ से है Raisina dialogue. Okay? Other than that, और बताओ. अब इसमें चलो हाइड्रो पे I'll come. Now India's approach to terror has also changed. Fine. Earlier, what was our approach to terrorism? We only, let's say, raised voice in international forums. We went to UN. By the way, we are also still doing that. But now what has changed? Zero tolerance. So now we have a more muscular foreign policy. There is a use of preemptive strikes, retaliatory strikes. Okay. So our approach to terrorism has changed. पहले क्या हो रहा था? It was a softer approach where we only spoke about raising the voice in UN, raising the voice in FATF, Financial Action Task Force. अब हम क्या करेंगे? There is a use of muscular foreign policy. हम ये भी बोलते हैं कभी कभी Dovell Doctrine. Dovell Doctrine combines both offense and defense. Okay, wherein you use, let's say, preemptive strikes, surgical strikes, etc. that you see. So there is a more muscular foreign policy in this case. Our approach to terrorism has changed. Fine. Right. 6 हो गए. रुक जाओ. I don't have enough space. I'll write 7 and other points. यहाँ तक लिखा आपने थोड़ा सा. Now we do not end here. एक point जो हमेशा याद रखना है. 7th आओ. Voice of Global South. How can we say we are voice of Global South? हाँ, गुड पॉइंट. देखो, वॉइस ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ आ जाओ, और उसी के साथ 8th पॉइंट आई अगेन टॉक अबाउट ओवरऑल सॉफ्ट पावर स्लैश कल्चरल डिप्लोमेसी. राइट, अब इसी सॉफ्ट पावर कल्चर में जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल योगा, आयुर्वेदा, बॉलीवुड, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा, right, sports, many things can be added here. Any element of culture, when we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, okay, all of this soft power, when India was hosting or heading the G20 summit, Delhi, ठीक है, वैक्सीन मित्र भी ले लेंगे इसमें, नहीं तो आप इसमें भी लिख लो, ओवरऑल वैक्सीन मैत्री. Now, when I say voice of global south, for example, one I can say, especially during COVID-19, we distributed vaccines, so there is an element of vaccine maitri. Okay. Now, other than that, what I can say, voice of global south, how can we say for ourselves? Ab socho, NAM in G20, African Union was made the member, even in case of BRICS. Okay. And constantly, for example, India has supported the cause of developing nations in WTO. अब WTO में भी where exactly in the Doha development agenda. Similarly, in climate change, we have also supported the case for developing countries, right? Small island developing states, right? Other than that, India, when I say global south, I can also bring in India as a Sagar doctrine, which has become, by the way, now Mahasagar. Security and growth for all. Fine. Voice of global south, which we want to be the first responder in terms of any other issues. So agar earthquake hai, cyclones, tsunamis, floods, so India not only evacuates its own citizen diaspora, but India provides relief. Okay, so that is also there. So relief not only in COVID-19 vaccine maitri, even this is there. Okay, responder या relief provider in that sense. तो आपने सुना होगा HADR. So India also leads in a lot of HADR operations, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. Okay. एनिमल जैसे पांडा, नो पांडा डिप्लोमेसी इज अ टर्म, मैंने बनाया नहीं अभी. हाँ, वो चलेगा पर नॉट दैट प्रोमिनेंट. सेल्फ रिलायंस कैन ऑल्सो बी वन. ठीक है, इन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग तो यू कैन टॉक अबाउट हाउ, हाँ, सो दैट कैन ऑल्सो बी टेकन. maybe I'll take one, and this can be a subset of economic part that we are focusing more on. Because with cheetah, the other issue is we were already sending, let's say to Japan also, some many years back we had sent. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि although illegal trafficking वो अलग topic है, वो कभी बाद में लेंगे. उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा animal share होते हैं, but that is illegal wildlife trafficking. Okay. Self-reliance के साथ ही लिख सकते हैं that India wants to establish itself as an alternative. Even that can be there, right? Self-reliance from the manufacturing point of view. And also this opportunity comes during the context of trade or tariff wars. So I think more than sufficient points you have. What changes have happened, broad points. You can easily expand on these points. The changes that have happened in the Indian foreign policy. Okay. ठीक है, देखो जो भी आप लोग जो specific points बता रहे हो, let's say like Bhishma, Guru, these are specific. We are talking of broad points and you can support them by a specific point. Okay. हाँ, तो मेक इन इंडिया इन द डिफेंस अगेन इंपॉर्टेंट है, और ये सेम चीज मेक इन इंडिया इन डिफेंस विल आल्सो डू इन इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी. वहां पे मैं और डिटेल में पढ़ाऊंगा. स्पेस में मुझे स्पेसिफिक पॉइंट बताओ कुछ. स्पेस तो बहुत पहले से हमने सार्क सैटेलाइट बनाई थी बहुत पहले. नहीं सारे ठीक है, बट अगर बहुत वी आर ऑलरेडी डूइंग इन स्पेस, अगर आपके पास पॉइंट्स इससे ज्यादा अगर स्कोप है लिखने का तो फिर सारे पॉइंट्स लिखो. अभी आई थिंक दिस इज मोर देन इनफ. This will come in, the moment you talk of ideology, you will come to soft power. That is soft power. Okay, India's model of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, etc. is, so India's example is that we are a democracy, world's largest democracy, yet we are able to maintain all these things, right? Because सबसे बड़ा challenge है democracy के लिए to maintain the voice of people also and to ensure development. नहीं कर रहे हैं, देखो जो चीजें कर रहे हैं ऐसे तो और भी points हैं, right? How to write continuity में we'll write the objectives that have remained. Space missions हैं तो अगर if you can take it up later, maybe 10th is technology. In technology you can mention one aspect is space. How to write continuity is simple. You'll write the continuity means what is continuity? That our goal of protecting our territory remains the same. How to do it has changed. अब क्या है? We go into more military strikes, more counter offense. Okay. Similarly, we want to promote peace in the neighborhood. We always did that. Even right now in NAM, in other institutions, we still talk about it. But our role in these institutions have become very proactive. So India's leadership role in the recent times has increased. Continuity और क्या है? जैसे not having नहीं, but वो specific नहीं बन पाएगा इसमें. That point is true, but that is not very specific point here. Okay. पंचशील इसमें कैसे लिखोगे? Continuity में some of the elements remain changed, but how to do it has changed. So continuity में the objectives that we have seen, okay, that still remains. That you still want to protect diaspora, you want to still go for development of your people, okay, maintain cordial relations with like-minded countries, okay, territory, sovereignty, all these aspects that will be part. But how to achieve that is the part of change. हाँ, तो जैसे हमने लिखा self reliance, उसमें specific example आ जाएगा. आकाश, as you were saying, is PLI. हाँ, तो that is a point. Domain क्या हमारा? Technology. In technology, one point is digital. Then you can have UPI. Within that, you can have space cooperation. तो theme है, right? That now there is more focus on technology. जैसे हमने 3 dimensions देखे थे: technology, connectivity, and trade. You can bring them separately also. But the chances are you will not have enough time because chances question में 2 या 3 parts होंगे. Maybe one part will be able to address. Okay, so you already have a lot of points. Now, emerging world order. What is the world order right now? देखो इसमें only a couple of things we'll make. So one thing is, of course, although this is also contested, world order is also showing now. First let me come to multipolarity. देखो, there are few terms that you should know. One is unipolar. सुना है? Unipolar means single power that is dominant, right? नहीं, single में हाँ, of course there will be monopoly. If I say from 1991 to almost 2001, this can be an era of unipolarity. Who was the main power here? What is bipolarity? Most specifically seen during Cold War, yes? Now when I'm saying multipolarity and I'm saying contested, for some scholars in the USA, still US is the biggest power. For some, right now the conflict is only between US and China. But we cannot deny the rise of India, rise of Japan, rise of Germany, rise of Brazil, okay, and older empires like Iran, Europe, Russia, Europe में चलो, I can say Turkey, etc. So that is telling you multipolarity. And major conflicts happen because of this. If there are too many powers who are competing for the global arena, global stage, there will be conflicts. You would have felt this in the last 4 or 5 years. Imagine your life before that. You did not see as many conflicts. Now there is huge range of conflicts. Middle East is always in a conflict. Yes or no? Russia-Ukraine conflict, which ideally should have not taken much time, it is a very long conflict. Why is that? Support of NATO. The huge support that they are getting. So when I'm saying multipolarity, of course, in this you can write the Cold War 2.0 between USA and China, but of course there are other powers like the rise of India, Japan, Germany, Brazil, etc. That can also be mentioned. So world order in that case is fragmented. Okay. Now, when I'm talking of nationalism, the world is also seeing nationalism also. Okay. What is happening in nationalism? Chalo, jaise humne dekha, right? America's first. And when this nationalism becomes economic nationalism, this leads to protectionism. Yes or no? This then leads to deglobalization. One example is America first. Even EU in certain cases is seeing the rise of nationalism. And by the way, this nationalism is a trend that is being seen. This also tells you, yes, the rise of the far right parties. Other than that, जो हमने changes देखे हैं in the previous case, what are the changes happening will all be the same points. These two will be other unique points. See, Cold War 2.0 is mentioned by some scholars. There is no specific. USA has not said that this is Cold War 2.0, but some people say that right now we are witnessing something like Cold War 2.0. So main two themes are there. There is multipolarity contested by the nationalism. Okay? And the moment nationalism becomes economic nationalism, this leads to the call for protectionism. This leads to call for xenophobia. This leads to call for migrants being deported, etc. Two major themes. Other than that, whatever we have seen in the previous parts, world in 21st century and the overall shifts that are happening will be the part of world order. So world order is seeing the rise of technological transformations, right? The rise of terrorism and radicalization, all those points will remain same. So there is a threat to rules-based order. Okay. Who is a threat to rules-based order? Which country is a big threat to rules-based order? Chalo, good. So China is, of course, we can also say North Korea. Okay. Abhi jo hum karenge, when we do China, we'll also discuss this. Okay, so the term that I've used is, again used by certain scholars, that there is a Cold War 2.0, something like it brewing between USA and China. Okay. If I were to ask you, the Cold War between USA and USSR is different from the Cold War between USA and China. Would that be correct? How? Right now, one of the issues they are challenging in trade war. Second, in technology, right? And in technology also the newer dimensions they are fighting in, right? Quantum, rare earths, semiconductors, right? And all of that is supported by a huge economic, right? Back then there was not, the trade war or tariff war was not there. Third point is, US already has a huge trade with China. Back then the trade with Russia, USSR was not there. Okay. And high trade is also, deficit is also there. Fair point. Okay? So we also know why is it different, but we also know why is it similar. Why is it similar? Defense and spade, and second, there is no direct confrontation also. Okay? It almost seems that they may fight, but the fight has not happened yet. Yes or no? Okay? So this right now for you is an overview, emerging world order. Now let's come to the snapshot of India's neighborhood. And now actually we're going to make way for each of these points. Okay? Shubham, I think some of these keywords, as I move with specific countries, we'll also see that. Abhi to we are just building for your class for IR. Ye bhi build up ho raha hai. Okay? Okay. Now, snapshot of India's neighborhood. In just 5 minutes, we'll have a snapshot. Then we'll go country by country. The moment I say India's neighborhood, okay? सबसे पहले क्या दिमाग में आना चाहिए आपके? China. Okay, and then of course you have other countries. Now with other countries, I'm writing other countries here with no disrespect to other countries. But in all these other countries, one dimension that will be common, जो हम हमेशा देखेंगे, will be fine. Number one. Second, now when I'm saying other countries, something that is most visible right now is what? Chalo, let's say if I take the case of Nepal, I take the case of what is going on here? Okay, for example, the main issue of political instability, number one. पहला issue, दूसरा क्या issue है? Yes or no? Increase China's presence. Third thing is, of course, if anything happens to them, because these are our bordering countries, their impact will be seen in India and even beyond. Yes or no? So they also impact our security. इसलिए मैंने बोला था यहाँ पे IR and international relations, sorry, internal security and IR will intersect in this topic. So if Nepal right now is having Gen Z protests, fine. So that means, and right now the security around the borders has been tightened. Number one, yes. Any country, the moment it becomes unstable, yes, there can be something known as a spillover effect. And if they are weak, the Chinese presence, which is already high, it can even increase more. This is one. Bangladesh, the fleeing of Sheikh Hasina, this is also a challenge. Sri Lanka, what was the issue? In 2022, they faced a huge economic crisis. And in this economic crisis, India provided them even better. So IMF had given them certain bailout. India also provided economic aid. Fine. And in Sri Lanka, we'll also see the huge presence of abhi Hambantota port dekhenge, okay, the Chinese influence here. With Pakistan, one issue is it is nuclear armed. Second, we know the Pahalgam attack and the Operation Sindoor. Third is, so the issue is still cross-border terrorism is a huge factor. Yes or no? So what we are seeing with our neighbors, okay, at least these four, the recent issue of political instability makes the whole region unstable. And if South Asia as a region is unstable, what is the challenge? Trade will be impacted, trust will be impacted. Yes, and because of this, you have to spend more on defense, security and less on development. Will this be a challenge? Yes. What are the other remaining countries that we did not write? Chalo, Afghanistan, yes. Okay, Bhutan, of course, still better relations. The moment I talk about Myanmar, I'll also link this to India's Act East, also India's Northeast. Maldives and Sri Lanka are also important from India's maritime security. Now, if you go to the previous year papers, whenever they ask you any country, अगर कोई भी country पे सवाल पूछते हैं, I'll also give you a framework and then we'll move ahead. So, and in this way your handout mein countries are tackled and mentioned. So whenever you see any country, so there is a basic framework which we'll have a look at. So let's say I'm taking any country here. First is, we have given you a context why this relation of this country is in news. Fine. If there happens to be any historical relations, because for example, if I say USSR, I can bring an example of 1971, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. Okay? With Nepal, we again have an old Treaty of Friendship. Fine. So historical, ya fir we say Roti Beti ka Rishta, very famously said. So we'll bring some element of history. Then with the countries, wherever possible, we'll also see areas of cooperation. So areas of cooperation se pehle I'll also tell you a common point, but after maybe 2-3 countries, ye aapko yaad ho jayega. importance of any country, and then let's say I go to areas of cooperation. Of course, then you will have challenges, and then in general a way forward. Now, when I say historical relations, fine. So this, in certain countries, as a Bangladesh, we can give some examples. There's a 1971 Bangla, the liberation. Now, the moment I say importance of any country, सबसे पहली चीज आपको क्या सोचना है उसका? Location. Okay? The very first important thing you'll think is its location, which also means, इसी को हम बहुत बार बोलते भी हैं, the geostrategic importance of a country. For any neighboring country, because it is our neighbor, they are very important to us. But even the countries which are far away, let's say if I talk about West Asia, their location can be important for energy resources. Central Asia Republic, important for uranium. Africa has important minerals, right? All of that. So, and second, especially your neighbors. If your neighbors are stable, your borders are secure, yes or no? So location is very one important thing. Other than that, I've told you, one is the economic importance of that region. Right? And third will be, let's say, if I bring in the cultural element, many times even in our neighborhood, because we know the borders are artificial. Earlier it was a whole one entity. So cultural roots honge, even with Afghanistan, even with Iran, Mesopotamia, we've had old roots, yes or no? So that means cultural means pehle koi ties the hamare, right? Right now, how the diaspora is connected, people to people. So three things always remember. Importance of any country. बहुत बार ऐसी simple सवाल आएगा, पिछले साल भी सवाल पूछा आपसे, of Maldives. The importance of Maldives to India. First thing, it's Maldives location. It is in the Indian Ocean, right? So very important for India's maritime security. Second, if I go for economic sense, a lot of ships and trade happens to flow through Maldives. That is also important. And third is the people and the cultural ties we have with Maldives. 3 points to common हमेशा होंगे. Yes? Then some other thing is your areas of cooperation. Right? And here we can talk about many things. Common points क्या होंगे? Strategic cooperation, which means अगर कोई defense exercise, defense deal, military exercise. So that is, let's say, the strategic aspect. I can bring in economic aspect. If there is any trade deal, in some articles we've also mentioned the figures. Itna trade hota hai, right? Economic aspect. We can also bring in here investment. In terms of connectivity, for example, abhi when we talk about Myanmar and other countries, I'll also talk about Kaladan, multimodal project. Fine. So connectivity is one dimension. You can also bring in science, okay, or space, etc. We have endless list here, right? Huge list. Science, space, even climate change for some countries can be one. Areas of cooperation. With EU, we have certain countries where the element of cooperation is green technology. Yes. So when I'm saying areas of cooperation, this is going to be very broad based. It can also be digital. It can also be, let's say, UPI, digital public infrastructure. This you will see not only with the neighborhood, but also with any continent, also with USA also. This is one easy format to cover your topic. Fine. Ab isme kya hoga, that when you read your current affairs, let's say today you read some detail of defense, maybe 6 months down, this detail has changed. Your framework will still remain the same. Yes. That means importance to wahi rahegi. Historical fact the same. Maybe in some of these elements, any small update has happened that you can update, right? Then you move to challenges. Now in your neighborhood, for every other country apart from China, China will be a challenge. Yes. And in India's neighborhood, first I'll tell you some common challenges. This you will see with all the countries. Aap socho, what will be the challenges in India's neighborhood? Ab sabse pehle I'll tell you, one thing that you often see is, and I'm telling you challenges right now with respect to India's neighborhood. Big brother. In fact, Nepal also had mentioned many times, that India acts like a big brother, right? They do not respect our autonomy, right? Even in the framing of our constitution for, let's say, Madheshis, India interfered a lot. So many countries have mentioned this part, big brother. Second issue you will see common is projects are stalled. अब अगर कोई भी project रुक गया and when it has to be continued, the cost will increase. So there will always be a cost overrun and there will always be a time overrun. यहाँ पे again something is said that India promises and China delivers, right? And this also is something that we see, right? One issue is stalled projects. One common challenge will be China. Okay, अब एक common challenge what you are seeing is the issue of political instability. Yes. Other than that, what are the challenges? Common challenges जो मैं लग रहा हूँ. चलो refugee, at least for a lot of countries, refugee will be one. Okay, and then issues of insecurity in terms of either the spread of terrorism, trafficking. अब देखो एक और चीज है, the moment I say trafficking, in our neighborhood you have two terms, you know. By the way, now these terms are also known as death triangle and death crescent. ठीक है? So these are what? The hotbeds of drug trafficking, right? And whenever you have borders, अगर आप किसी कंट्री से बॉर्डर शेयर करोगे तो you will have the issues of trafficking, yes or no? And we will see trafficking में हमेशा 4 points याद रखोगे. One is drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, cattle. This will be common. And because the challenge is we have porous borders. So drug trafficking hogi through golden triangle and golden crescent. You have arms trafficking, you have human trafficking happens, and of course you also have cattle smuggling, cattle trafficking, which can also lead to illegal wildlife trade. IWT is not Indus Water Treaty here, it is illegal wildlife trade. अब मैं neighborhood में if I want to talk about, I can bring in water या hydro power. This is also a challenge. Many of the dams or many of the rivers, they don't have an agreement. Okay, we don't share hydrological data. ये भी challenge है. और major क्या issue, जैसे for example with China we have a problem कि China, we have a huge deficit with China, but with other countries the issue is they have a huge deficit with us. So all these are common challenges. तो एक बार अगर आपको neighborhood के common challenges पता हैं, then covering neighborhood would not take enough time. ठीक है? हाँ, even in border, yes, poor border demarcation, we can have some specific points also. हाँ. No, this is not Indus. This is illegal wildlife trade. Cattle के साथ लिखा है. Yes, connectivity is a challenge. हाँ. You can use it. Yeah. That is also one aspect, but in general, agar issue hai, sometimes the issue is also with us. But in the recent times, even political instability agar hogi, so even this is going to be impacted. The moment there is political instability, economic things cannot happen. But this has happened only in the recent past. Challenge, but abhi we'll see this in more specific points. Stalled projects, but when I'm saying there are projects where that have been stalled for more than 15-20 years. ऐसे काफी बड़े connectivity projects हैं with certain countries. So for that we cannot simply blame कि we are not to be blamed. There have been instances कि our files have not moved at pace, so that is also a challenge. ठीक है? एक basic snapshot मिल रहा है अपनी neighborhood का. And in that, then the question is, how does India move forward? Either you will get a question broad on India's neighborhood, or the question can be specific to any specific neighbor that is there. Now, before I move ahead, एक last एक और term है. In fact, you should know two terms here. One is, चलो रुक जाओ, एक I should also make policy here. Now, with sections, I will also be talking to you about policies of India. Okay. Now, अगर neighborhood है, so what we'll talk about? So I'll say neighborhood first policy. You also have, let's say for Southeast Asia, what do you have? If there is things related to maritime, Sagar, which has become West Asia के लिए you have your look, for Central Asia you also have connect, Central Asia policy. Now, when we are going to write an answer, अगर question में if you're talking of any neighborhood, fine. So if we have made this framework, importance है, areas of cooperation, etc., we will also include importance में, etc. How is it linked to India's policy, if that be the case? अगर neighborhood में है, तो we'll write importance for India's neighborhood first policy. If you're talking of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, it is important for India's connect, Central Asia policy. So points आपने location बताया, economic, cultural, and you also link it to India's policy. Fine. And then of course areas of cooperation, challenges that are there. जो point है हमारा neighborhood first policy का, this point you can also add to जहां में हमने लिखा ना continuity and changes. In changes also mention the point neighborhood first, because neighborhood first policy also started from 2014 onwards. Now in neighborhood, one thing is neighborhood first policy, but we can also invoke another old doctrine, गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन. ओके, अब इसको क्या पता होना चाहिए आपको इसके बारे में, गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन के बारे में? ओनली वन थिंग, वन कीवर्ड, इट टॉक्स अबाउट नॉन रेसिप्रोसिटी, which means if you are a big neighbor, you have a lot of power, even if you carry out some development expenditure at some country, you should not expect anything in return. Right? In fact, especially जब Maldives के पिछले साल अगर आपको याद होगा, the whole controversy, right, with respect to Maldives, the India out campaign before that, okay? So there was a lot of talks that India spends a lot of money on Maldives development. Now we should stop development because they have anti-India sentiment. So for India's soft power projection, we already have a Gujarat doctrine, okay? IK, who was IK Gujarat? The former Prime Minister. He also spoke about a lot of points that neighborhood should be our first priority, okay, development, respect sovereignty, territory, integrity. सबसे important point क्या है? Non-reciprocity. So especially in case of Nepal, in the smaller countries in your neighborhood, you can last में way forward में you can use this. In the body we can talk about how it is integral for India's neighborhood for first policy, but we can also say how the principle of non-reciprocity is also an important part as mentioned in Gujarat doctrine. तो अभी जब श्रीलंका के केस में when we gave a lot of aid, तो we also there were a lot of mention of Gujarat doctrine. तो policies will also tell you because these are comprehensive in nature. Maritime section जब करेंगे श्रीलंका etc. I'll talk about Sagar and Mahasagar also. Sagar means security and growth for all. ठीक है? That is there. अभी कनेक्टिविटी में BRI वो सारे पॉइंट्स हम करेंगे, ठीक है? अभी चाइना स्टार्ट होने दो, तो चाइना में we will talk about the issues of China and all the related aspects. ठीक है, is this fine? Because there will be some common points with China that we will see one by one. Are we clear till here? ठीक है, now let's come to India China. Before I start some of these topics, I'll also tell you the tone of that topic right now. Fine? The tone of the topic of India China right now is very mild. क्यों? In the recent times, there has been some disengagement. When I taught this perhaps a year before, the tone was slightly more realistic in nature. Right now, the tone is mild. The reason is the recent articles, the recent Born homie. देखिए आपने poses of photos in the SCO summit, and Trump has mentioned that we have lost, है ना? And we've lost India and Russia to the deepest and darkest China, right? वो भी ट्वीट कहीं पे होगा, मैंने शायद लिखा होगा यहाँ पे. बट सो दैट इज वाई द टोन हियर, एंड यू कैन जस्ट मेंशन द टोन इज ऑप्टिमिस्टिक. अब हो सकता है 6 महीने में समथिंग रैंडम न्यू हैपेंस, देन द टोन विल चेंज. इसलिए इन व्हेन दिस आर्टिकल एंड्स, वी आर एंडिंग इट ऑन अ एलिफेंट ड्रैगन टैंगो. हु इज एन एलिफेंट हियर? इंडिया. हु इज अ ड्रैगन? चाइना. दीज टू टर्म्स आर कॉमनली यूज्ड, राइट? आपने एक बुक का नाम सुना होगा, Does the Elephant Dance? सुना है ना? डेविड मलोन की बुक है, बहुत फेमस. तो Does the Elephant Dance का मतलब क्या है? You're talking of India. Okay, so here that is used, and here we've also quoted certain important figures. जैसे शिव शंकर मेनन, the former NSA. But at the outset, I'm telling you the tone is slightly optimistic based on the current times. Now, India and China marking 75 years. अब इसमें क्या है? In your write-ups now, you will have certain introductions and you will have certain conclusions. You can go through it. Don't try to exactly memorize it. Understand the sentiment behind that. Fine. And this article also ends with US and China trade war. So you'll also have an understanding, and followed by we directly go to Nepal. Fine. So यहाँ पे the tone is optimistic. That is the very first thing. Now we'll see. Now, this is, अब देखो ये अच्छी लाइन है, this is one of the most complex bilateral equations, most complex. And why is that? देखो, you have civilizational links, but you have strategic rivalries. Okay, so there are civilizational links, very old links. What are the civilizational links here? Buddhist links, you know Huan Shang, okay, Fa Hin, right? So there, that is there, so civilization links है, but challenged by strategic rivalries. What is the strategic rivalry here? Okay, रुक जाओ, मैं rivalry आपको, चलो strategic rivalry I'll tell you. India believes in a multipolar Asia, in a multipolar world. China believes in a unipolar Asia, in a multipolar world. This is the biggest reason for their conflict. So if I were to imagine, let's say China, India, and जो भी अभी चीजें हैं ना, that you should write it alongside. We will not have enough time for dictation. अब देखो China, we said China as a dragon, India as a, India believes in a and this, by the way, is their vision, your vision of world order. Okay, so multipolar Asia in multipolar world, and here you have the belief is unipolar Asia in, हो सकता है बाद में they may become unipolar world also, and the reason is, and this is mentioned in prominent books, जैसे अभी एक बुक आई है बहुत recent, how China sees the world, and there was a previous book that was how India sees the world. ये टर्म आप बहुत बार पढ़ोगे न्यूज़पेपर्स में. China has something known as a middle kingdom complex. Here it means that in the entire ocean in the world, middle center में कौन है? China. That is the middle kingdom complex. that for them, of course, they are the most important, most, let's say, relevant nation, and other nations are also there. But middle kaun hai? Most important position in China. So this will always lead to a conflict. And this conflict is seen not only on borders, on land, also on oceans. हर जगह conflict दिखेगा आपको. तो border conflict जो हमें लगता है, it is only a manifestation of the vision. Yes? So just remember this. Unipolar, then I'll connect it to the challenges and the areas of cooperation very quickly. ठीक है? Now, if you go back, अब देखो, since some time there was said whether there will be an Asian century or not. So here also people are divided. Some say they may cooperate, जैसे अभी cooperate कर रहे हैं, but some people also give the example of the Galwan clash of 2020, COVID-19 के समय पे. There was a huge contestation on the borders, yes or no? So Asia's rise hinges on India and China learning to rise together and not apart. अब ये चीजें आप यूज कर सकते हो अपने कंक्लूजन्स में व्हेन द क्वेश्चन इज लाइक दैट. अगर क्वेश्चन की टोन है दैट डू वी सी द साइमल्टेनियस राइज ऑफ इंडिया एंड चाइना एटसेट्रा एंड व्हाट फैक्टर्स विल इट डिपेंड ऑन, तो मे बी एट द एंड आई कैन राइज समथिंग लाइक दिस. द एशियाज राइज डिपेंड्स ऑन द राइज ऑफ इंडिया एंड चाइना लर्निंग टू राइज टुगेदर एंड नॉट अपार्ट. इफ दे राइज अपार्ट व्हाट वुड हैपन? देयर विल बी कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स, राइट? दिस इज वन. Now, let's come to this part, historical relations. अब ये देखो, ये use कैसे करना है, जो ये अपना write up है, how to use in the answers. Let's say you get a 15 marker on China, then a couple of points you can use from this. अगर 10 marker होगा तो in general cooperation के और divergence के इतने points हैं, you have more than enough points available with you. Fine. And historical things, of course, there can be many more, but this is just to give you a broad overview. ठीक है? That number one. 1950, India recognized PRC. What is PRC? People's Republic of China. Okay, that was the first contact. There was a Panchsheel agreement, principles of coexistence. ठीक है? And you can just note down later in the homework as कौन से ऐसे 5 principles हैं. Okay. What is 1962 here? Yes, we just saw the conflict that happened, and we also have civilizational linkages. Okay, जो Zhuan Zhang है, this is actually Huan Shang. Okay, Tagore had also visited this Bodhi Dharma. Okay, and very recently there was a seminar at the Vishwa Bharati, which again shows that there is heritage, there is cultural contact between these two. Okay, so not only is it very old, but even in the recent times we have seen that. Fine. Now we go to this slide. Strategic convergence. अब इसमें first thing you have to remember here, there is already a lot of dispute between India and China, but despite that there is convergence. Now please remember, this is not unique to India and China. पहली बात, क्यों? Even USA and China have a lot of conflict, despite that they do a lot of trade. Same is also true in India and China case. This in general is known as complex interdependence. It simply means that the nations with which you may go for a war, you are forced to trade with them. आपकी dependence इतनी ज़्यादा है. And USA and China cannot go to a direct military conflict. क्यों? Trade पे dependence बहुत ज़्यादा है. This is known as complex interdependence. You are dependent, but it is very complex. So you have issues also, and you have areas of cooperation also. That makes it very difficult. Phrase सुना ना आपने? If somebody asks you how are you doing, you say it's complicated. So you cannot tell भाई अच्छा चल रहा है खराब चल रहा है मुझे खुद नहीं पता क्या चल रहा है. Yes or no? In that sense, this is complex interdependence. Yes. Now, here first see the dimensions. By 2 or 3 countries आपको dimensions याद होने लग जाएंगे. और अभी हमें इनको cram नहीं करना. There is a lot of facts here. These facts can change with your current times. हो सकता है 1-1.5 साल में figures change हो जाए. 3.5 billion becomes 2.5 billion. Fine. Our first objective for the people, and I think some of you may not be very well versed with prelims. किसने अभी prelims दिया हुआ है यहाँ पे? How many of you have attempted prelims? How many of you are supposed to write the prelims first time? ठीक है? तो you guys don't be overawed. अभी हम देखने वाले हैं डायमेंशंस, ठीक है? जस्ट सी द डायमेंशंस. पहले डायमेंशन क्या है? इकोनॉमिक. सेकेंड इज लेट्स से क्लाइमेट डेवलपमेंट. थर्ड इज border management, cultural, and last is multilateral. Now, with every country, many dimensions you may remember, but generally you may forget this. तो इसको जरूर याद रखो. The two countries do not engage just bilaterally, they can also engage at forums. And India और China का relation slightly better क्यों हुआ है? Because in the recent Kazan summit of BRICS, okay, this was the 16th BRICS summit by the way, the relations got certain improvement, and now of course they are on a better trajectory. Yes, abhi recently they met again at SCO summit. Kahan pe hui SCO summit? Tianjin is in China only, right? It happened in China. So our point is that multilateral platforms are again a very good way to interact. So even if I talk about Bangladesh, if India and Bangladesh have an issue, they can still use BIMSTEC, right? They can support each other's cause for UN and other areas, yes or no? तो ये एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट डायमेंशन रहेगा हमारे लिए फॉर एवरी कंट्री. इंडिया एंड यूएस ऑफ कोर्स कॉपरेट एट द सेम लेवल, बट यूएसए आल्सो सपोर्ट्स इंडियाज कॉज फॉर यूएनएससी सीट. तो मल्टीलेटरल एक डायमेंशन हम याद रखेंगे, ठीक है? अब आते हैं वापस, एक एक करके देखते हैं. इकोनॉमिक इंटरडिपेंडेंस, फाइन. सो ऑफ कोर्स देयर इज अ बायलैटरल ट्रेड दैट इज गोइंग ऑन. फॉर नाउ जस्ट सी द फिगर, यू डोंट हैव टू रिमेंबर इट. इफ यू डू अ कपल ऑफ रीडिंग्स देन दिस विल मेक सेंस. ट्रेड है, this is good. What is bad about trade? There's a huge trade deficit in favor of, right, China. This is a challenge. We import APIs. What are APIs? In this context, APIs actually means active pharmaceutical ingredients. वैसे आप computers, electronics में there is also one more API, that is application programming interface, वो अलग है. This API is for medicines. Now, India is known as global pharmacy of the world. True or false? True. And India is self-reliant on medicines. नहीं. 80% of APIs we import from China. Huge import dependence. Fine. Other than that, electronics, exports, etc. Iron ore, chemicals, we have many things. And Chinese FDI is also coming in startups. Any example that you can give me? कोई नया जो चल रहा हो startup? Defunct नहीं. Paytm, okay, fair point. And especially because of that China angle, there was a lot of scrutiny by the RBI also. We can say that example. Yes? So Chinese FDI is in startup. Chinese FDI आने से problem क्या है? पैसा है, आने दो. Data. So, which again brings us back. We are saying China and India. In terms of political structure, what is the difference? Chalo, I'll write it here. Which is a democracy and which is not a democracy? What is China? There is more of authoritarianism here. Second thing is, of course, it has its communist system as opposed to the liberal system that you see in India. Yes or no? So fundamentally the world view is also different, which is why always there are allegations कि अगर China based कोई company है, the Chinese government may snoop on the data. Yes or no? This is also a challenge. So not only is it authoritarian, तो यहाँ पे state surveillance. Yesterday only I think China has mentioned that do not take chips from Nvidia. Okay, because Nvidia is becoming extremely pro-West, right? We also know what happened to Alibaba's founder. क्या हुआ था? गायब हो गए थे for some time. Okay, who is the founder of Alibaba? Jack Ma. Okay, so whenever you see any countries, जैसे when I say India and USA, both of them are democracies. One is world's oldest democracy, one is world's largest democracy. यहाँ पे क्या केस है? Political systems अलग हैं, values भी अलग हैं. Yes. India will value a lot of transparency. They don't value transparency. Vision is also different. Hence the clashes will happen, right? Okay. So economic interdependence is one. Now other than that, climate and development. So they have a joint stance in UNFCCC. That means United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, right? Similar stance hai. Support for ISA. ISA here means International Solar Alliance. Climate or development mein there is a lot of cooperation between India and China. Fine. For UN peacekeeping, global health, disaster relief, there is collaboration. Okay. Now, border management में एक स्टार मार्क लगाओ. सबसे बड़ा, और यहां पे डैश करके बस लिखना है, मेन है पॉइंट डिसएंगेजमेंट. There is already a huge contestation between China and India on borders. In the recent few times, there is a disengagement that has happened on the borders. ठीक है? So special representative talks हुई हैं यहाँ पे 33rd working mechanism consultation, and point is disengagement. I think हमने दो नाम देपसांग, डेमसोक एंड डेपसांग है, यहीं पे लिख सकते हैं. डिसएंगेजमेंट कहां पे हुई है? दो जगहों पे. वन इज डेमचोक, DEMCHOK, एंड वन इज डेपसांग प्लेन्स. Demchok and Depsang Plains. There has been disengagement. Okay. Other than that, so there is a border management dialogue. कुछ महीने पहले, some months back, there was a lot of tension on the borders. Okay, there was a huge military from both the sides. And when I say disengagement, क्या होगा? अपनी positions पीछे करेंगे थोड़ा सा. And if there is lesser military, that means more confidence. Yes. Which is why CBM, confidence building measures, are also happening. कहाँ पे? Galwan, Gogra and Pangong So. This is a recent development. इसी वजह से the tone is optimistic. And all of this happened because of the BRICS Kazan summit. In fact, अभी जो recent SCO summit हुई है, it was attended by the Indian Prime Minister, and this was the first visit of Indian Prime Minister after 7 years. Right, the Tanjing Declaration जो है 7 years, so that's a big time. And just few months back only Dr. S. Jaishankar had visited, right? And he had met Wang Yi. So on border management, what we have seen, just याद रखो, disengagement at Demchok and Depsang. Okay, these are the areas. After that, I'll just also give you an overview of the border dispute in general, and there is some confidence building measures that are going on. Okay, that's a positive step. Cultural exchange में, again cultural में you'll have similar points, right? People to people. So right from Ayurveda, yoga, language, etc. Right? Direct flights, Kailash Mansarovar, all of this helps in better people to people ties. Again, this will help you in soft power. And जब भी problem होगा किसी countries के बीच में, you can have diplomatic dialogues. Okay, but even better than that is people to people ties. Fine. So this is one. Now, they are also coordinating in multilateral platforms like BRICS hai. BRICS with the I and C is what? India and China. You have SCO. What is full form of SCO? Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Fine. You have G20. You have AIIB. What is AIIB? Asia Investment Infrastructure Bank. What is NDB? NDB is related to BRICS. Okay. और BRICS की कजान समिट थी, which spoke about global south, and जहां पे BRICS कजान लिखा है यहां पे just write down this is the 16th one. Very recently 17th also has happened. So when we do BRICS, I'll do 17th summit with you. ठीक है? Okay. Now, if we have followed till here, this is a very important. इस पे चाहे star mark लगाओ आप. In only just, I think, a handful of words, all the major things have been covered. Now, the very first thing that you see here, what are the issues between India and China, right? So we have number one is your border issues. ठीक है? सबसे पहला point है unresolved LAC. What is LAC? Line of actual control. What is LOC? That is with Pakistan. LAC related which area is also there? Okay, so we have unresolved LAC. We had the Galwan clash in 2020, and there's a point mentioned as China's dual use of villages. This point we also see in internal security. What is the meaning of dual use of villages? आप क्या करोगे? That China goes for development of villages, and while doing the development, they also have their military. So it means the villages can also be used for surveillance. Yes. To counter this, does India have anything? ये इंडिया का काउंटर है. Vibrant villages program. Aspirational district is something else. That is there, but that is older. This is new. Vibrant villages program. BA, DP, etc. We'll see when we do internal security. To counter this, India has vibrant, and this we are doing in Arunachal Pradesh. So we are also developing borders, villages, and these are supposed to be India's eyes and ears. Through Vibrant Villages program. Okay. Now, second आते हैं BRI. BRI में bracket में लिखना है 2013, which means more than 10 years have passed. Belt and Road Initiative. Now, what is Belt and Road Initiative? Belt and Road, it includes both land, which means the road component, and also maritime component. Fine. And this is China's infrastructure initiative. Yes or no? They say they want to develop infrastructure, which is a component of connectivity. मैंने आपको तीन चीजें बोली थी. So the three biggest trends in IR right now. One is technology, connectivity, trade. All the three are transforming. This blends in connectivity. So they want to improve connectivity, and what does China say? आपने सुना होगा golden old ancient silk route. They want to just bring it back. अब issue क्या है सबसे बड़ा इसमें? The first issue in CPEC is a part of BRI is CPEC, that is known as China Pakistan Economic Corridor. It passes through POK. So India has mentioned this violates India's sovereignty. ठीक है, पहला issue. Second, this also leads to something known as string of pearls. इसको हम बोलते हैं, एक और टर्म है strategic encirclement. Now, for example, this is India. Let's say this is Pakistan. So what is CPEC doing? CPEC connects Gwadar port of Pakistan to Kashgar in China. Gwadar को Kashgar से connect करता है CPEC. One, for example, you have Sri Lanka. Which port is here? Hambantota port. In Myanmar, you have CMEC, China Myanmar Economic Corridor. Yes or no? Let's say this is Africa. This is the Horn of Africa. यहाँ पे क्या है? Djibouti. So what are you seeing? India is getting encircled. This is known as string of pearls. Right? Of course, India also has a strategy to counter it. उसको बोलते हैं necklace of diamonds. Okay? And these are not official strategies. These are also what defense experts, they also use these terms. So what is string of pearls? That China's projects can be used with the military mindset. They can be used for surveillance in and around the Indian Ocean, which can lead to strategic encirclement of India. Can we say this? तो ऐसे काफी अभी examples हैं. CPEC में याद रखोगे, connects Gwadar to Kashgar. Gwadar to Kashgar, it connects. Fine. So that is CPEC in POK. String of pearls is the strategic encirclement of India. Now, ports, Kasme, Gwadar है, Hambantota. Where is Hambantota? Gwadar is connected to Kashgar. Now, the BRI does not end here. Now, when I'm saying of China's BRI, एक चीज हमने क्या देखी? एक तो हमने अभी देखा string of pearls. Second, we also saw that it leads, let's say CPC है, that the issue is of sovereignty. Okay. Other issues क्या है? It leads to checkbook or debt trap diplomacy. Okay, checkbook या debt trap. What is the meaning of debt trap? Right, these are long term. So let's say a port is on 99 years of lease. Okay, so these are basically what? These are not grants, these are loans. And in loans many times the terms and conditions are not very transparent. दूसरा क्या issue है? Checkbook क्यों? Check फाड़ा आपने and you gave it, but you don't know what are the terms and conditions. Now there is already political instability. तो हो सकता है कोई नई government है, there is a new government, they want to use this loan but they don't know at what cost. Fine, so they make the best use of people, nations economic vulnerability. This is known as debt trap diplomacy. This has been seen in the case of Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka का जो debt था उसमें biggest component was Chinese debt. We have seen this in the case of Pakistan also. Other nations are waiting to see this, right? उनके भी अच्छे दिन आएंगे. चलो, so checkbook है, debt trap है. Other than that, what can I say? Anything which is peculiar issue in BRI. Of course, one issue is the employment. It does not generate local employment because it is the Chinese people who come. So this issue is also there. One is employment is not local. Second, another issue is the issue of transparency. There is no guarantee who is going to store data, how transparent is it. So employment is not local. This also creates discontent. You go to Africa. Ab Africa maybe if you're not creating employment for local people, it is going to create resentment. Yes or no? This is an issue. Now, so chalo, this is also a term I can say. This, all of this can lead to neo-colonialism. Especially if I give the example of Africa, even in Southeast Asia, this can be an example of neo-colonialism. Okay? Now, this is one aspect. Also remember, there is also a counter by West to Chinese BRI. सबसे पहला point we can write is Partnership for Growth, Investment in Infrastructure. This is by G7. This was earlier known as Build Back Better World. ठीक है? Remember that IMEC is a part of PGII. And IMEC was launched in the G20 summit, which was hosted by India in 2023. India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. ये भी infrastructure project है. This is also an infrastructure project, right? Other than that, Blue Dot Network led by USA. Now this is not a connectivity project, but this is a rating instrument. It rates connectivity projects. तो ये क्या करेगा? West projects को, the projects led by West, it will give a good rating. The projects of China, etc., it will not give a very good rating. So it is basically, in that sense, a rating project. Other than that, two more initiatives I can give. One is AAGC, Asia Africa Growth Corridor, by India and Japan. Now, India and Japan have a common rival in that case. What is that? China. So they are collaborating on that front. And last I can say EU's project है Global Gateway by EU. तो ये सारी चीजें एक जगह पे लिख लेना आप, otherwise you'll find this very scattered. Asia Africa Growth Corridor. Asia Africa Growth Corridor. ठीक है? And this will make sense as we move along. So I'm just telling you about, because till now a very specific question on this BRI has not been asked, but this can always be a probable question. ठीक है? Now, Partnership for Growth, Investment and Infrastructure by G7. Now, you have economic imbalance. So there is a huge trade deficit. We can underline how much is it. Very close to $100 billion now. Okay. API, electronics pay, we have a import dependency. I've just repeated. So Partnership for Growth, Investment and Infrastructure. ठीक है? Other than that, we have written water conflicts. What is that? Weaponization of water. इसको बोल सकते हैं hydro power conflicts. Yes or no? So there are two certain dams. One is Zangmu Dam and the Medong Dam on Brahmaputra River. And issue is lack of water sharing treaty. Kabhi in an ad hoc basis, sometimes data is shared, sometimes data is not shared. So lack of real-time data sharing is the challenge. Yes? Now, a very important point is assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific. यहाँ पे आप लिखेंगे 9 dash line. So let's see if this is visible. So it is not very clear, but I'll just tell to you. देखो, there are certain islands here. Okay. एक 9 dash line बनाई हुई है, 9 dashes overall. So there are Paracel Island, Spratly Island, Scarborough Shoal, some important regions, and they are conflicting with many other countries. So Malaysia will have a conflict, Indonesia, okay, Philippines. So there is a lot of disputed claims around the region. This is known as the 9 dash line. So with Southeast Asia, this is a big conflict. Yes or no? तो क्या challenge है हमारा? मतलब at least in Southeast Asia, the China has territorial and sovereignty claims on various islands which is disputed. Now this matter had gone to the Permanent Court of Arbitration, PCA, and the verdict was against China. What happened? China ने नहीं सुना, and then USA said and other countries you should follow rules based order. So China then replied, आपको याद है Nicaragua and other cases that when the verdict was against you, क्या आपने सुना था? Of course, right? So then you also get to know that rules are generally for average nations. The nations which have a lot of might, a lot of power, what they do generally? Break the rules. Fine. So China has assertiveness in Indo-Pacific through a 9 dash line. Okay. There are competing claims in the Indo-Pacific. Many times what will happen? They will put their, let's say, naval ship. Right? This will happen. So assertiveness is against rules based order. इसीलिए जब आप पढ़ोगे Indo-Pacific, we will say we want rules based order. So that is nothing but an indirect mention of China. So it is against rules based order. One. Then there is a strategic nexus, military nuclear cooperation with Pakistan. अब आप मुझे बताओ, there was of course credible proof that in the Operation Sindoor, China was helping Pakistan. But despite that, why is India inching closer to China? आप बताओ, why? In trade can be one, but other than that, the main issue is of US. But I'm just telling you that even despite this fact, that we are getting closer, let's say, to the likes of Russia or China, but that also tells you that And this is why for some people, the Tanjung that declaration is slightly surprising, right? Because India has stood toward the side of China also. Fine? इसीलिए मैं आपको ये point बता रहा हूँ. So there is military nuclear cooperation with Pakistan, yes. Even the support for terror proxies that we have seen. And why would China support Pakistan? नहीं, क्यों सपोर्ट क्यों करता है? फायदा क्या है? सबसे सिंपल चीज, उसको अपने प्रोजेक्ट भी तो बचाने हैं. They have money invested. So one obvious reason is they have to protect their money. Second thing is, if they provide money for proxy and for support, they also get things in return in general, right? So that will create instability for India also. Or the moment I say that sometimes it is said, why are wars fought? Any answer? लड़ाई क्यों होती हैं? To help in weapon sales, right? To keep the military industrial complex strong. Okay, fine. Technology leverage, 75% smart mode अच्छा market है, risk to India's EVs. How come EVs? The components that are used in EVs, we have a huge dependence on China, right? Think from batteries, lithium, 5G, semiconductor chips, etc. Cyber security, cyber threats. You would have read in 2020. So they were in Mumbai, the attacks, the cyber attacks that were from Chinese hacktivists. Or sort of hacker and activist. It becomes hacktivist. That also happened. And last point, just see, China blocks India's NSG membership and the UNSC seat. Now, China sometimes supports India in multilateral platforms, but especially in the UN. And this front, they oppose it. So if I give you example of Masood Azhar, okay, and say, let's say designation of certain terrorists, all the other members of the P5, the 4 members, they were agreeing, but China used a veto. इसीलिए veto को बोलते हैं the most undemocratic element of the entire exercise. Yes? So this is also clear. So while देखने में कम लग रहा है, but this covers a huge range of challenges which India and China have. This is also fine. Okay. In the border disputes, I think some of you have mentioned. I'll only mention this in very brief. When we say the borders between India and China, let's say अगर मैं इस तरह से border बनाता हूँ, इसमें couple of things you have to know. This is the Arunachal Pradesh. Couple of things to know. Middle sector is largely undisputed. Dispute है किसमें? Western sector and in the eastern sector. Now you have to know a couple of terms. बहुत बार सुना भी जाता है. China के साथ कुछ terms हैं, जैसे one of the terms that you often hear is China's 5-finger policy. Okay, what is that? So all the elements, right from the part of western sector to the part of Nepal to even Bhutan, Sikkim, Arunachal, even including Tibet, right? They take Tibet as the thumb and they consider all of this part to be their own, right? So China's 5-finger policy gives weight to its territorial ambitions. अब देखो border disputes क्यों होते हैं, specifically why in South Asia? Some common points. Who creates borders? Man or God? यहाँ पे man. And which man are we talking about? Britishers. So especially the problems we are facing right now are colonial heritage. Fine. This is also one major issue. In fact, one issue I'll tell you here. This happened. There is a McMahon line, there is a Johnson line, etc. Crux समझो यहाँ पे जो है, especially in the case of Arunachal Pradesh, there was a Shimla agreement that was done. This was done between Britishers and some of the representatives from Tibet. Now China says that this is not a representative of Chinese stand and we do not agree to it, we do not bind by it. So they have rejected the Shimla agreement, and because of this, this particular issue happens, right? So that is a challenge number one. So on the eastern sector. Second, China always considers Arunachal Pradesh to be their own, which is why आपने सुना होगा they give stapled visas. सुना है? The stapled visa is why? Because of this only, just to humiliate and show that आप लोग को तो नहीं चाहिए visa. One. In the western sector also, see, whenever a line is being created, you only have to remember, let's say if there are two lines and this, we will of course agree to the part which gives us more, they will agree to the part which gives them more. So here also in the western sector there were two differing lines and two differing perceptions, okay? So this area is also contested in the case of western sector on Aksai chain. Two differing lines and two differing perceptions. In the eastern sector, the challenge is they do not agree with the whole Shimla agreement because they say that it was signed by people who are not representative of the real Chinese interest, right? This is a challenge. Ab hua kya hai? In the western sector, there are many points. Two of them, जो अभी हमने देखा, one is Dem Chok and Debsang, they have seen a slight de-escalation. That is again a step in the right direction. So that is one. But how it happens in the next 1 year, half, let's say 6 months, this again only time will tell. If there is continuous disengagement, then we are on the right track. Other than that, that is why there is still heavy force nearby the region, right? That is the element of realism that we have seen. You cannot simply go by words, but you also, आपने सुना होगा बहुत famous है, trust but verify, okay? Trust करो पर verify करो. Now coming back, are we clear on these terms? Okay. Now, okay, so I think next point is this only, na? हाँ. Reasons for undissolved water dispute. So ये देख लिया हमने, Chinese agreement of 1914. What is the reason for dispute? They do not consider कि agreement जिनके बीच में sign हुआ, that was not a representative of Chinese interest. One issue. Second, these are part of Chinese tactics to keep some things always in dispute. Okay. Then borders are undemarcated. Even this is a challenge, right? Which can also be a British problem. And even right now, till now, these have not been resolved. And overall, there is a lack of mutual trust, especially after 1962. Okay. The Panchsheel agreement, etc. spoke about trust, but now there is a lack of mutual trust. These are the reasons for unresolved border disputes. We can even add China's 5-finger policy. Okay, this we have already done. India's concerns with BRI, sovereignty and territorial integrity, strategic encirclement. This is known as string of pearls. देखा हमने? There is a dead trap. This also we have seen manifested even in Sri Lanka, even in Pakistan. It has security implications because the same infrastructure project can always be militarized. Yes or no? And lastly, there is economic competition. What is the economic competition here? Because it's an infrastructure project, so there will be more competing players. Now the West, alternate models will also compete. This will lead to a lot of economic competition. China will want to increase its influence more. Again, more and more debt trap. Yes or no? So these are the Indian concerns, and even more than that, we can talk about transparency, the issues, etc. This can also be mentioned there. Now, there are some reset signals. This is again the recent part, which is why the tone is slightly optimistic. तो स्पेशल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव लेवल टॉक्स, यहां पे क्या हुआ, बॉर्डर प्रोटोकॉल्स की बात हुई है. Modi Z BRICS meet, first formal meet in 7 years, and we can also write the recent SCO meet. This happened in 7 years, a proper meet when the Indian PM went to China, because this SCO recent summit happened in China. Debsang and Demchok, they've had major disengagement, fine. And hydrological data sharing, this has resumed on Brahmaputra. Kailash Yatra, again has got a green light. Joint academic exchange and revival. So all of this can point towards maybe some optimistic hope. This is there, right? Now, अब जब हम एक बार way forward पे आ रहे हैं, तो again I'll just tell you one thing. If you have any country, कोई भी country है, बहुत बार क्या होता है, way forward सोचे कैसे, how to write the way forward for a country, right? So just a framework I'll tell you, just for thinking, and then of course we can maneuver and change it. Now, the very first thing we can always say is track one diplomacy. What is track one diplomacy? Basically from government to. So when things are fine, this is what happens, track one diplomacy, right? But if things are not fine, what would you do? Either track 2 or track 3 diplomacy. What is track 2? So non-government to non-government, which can be the retired people, and track 3 is simple people to people. Okay, so non-government means they are not active part of the government. Retired officials are there, they can engage and they can discuss and they can then bring it to the government. So ऐसे terms use होते हैं, these are the terms you can use. For example, if a country does not have favorable relations, we can say now track 2 or track 3 diplomacy can be used. Yes? Now, other things other than that in a way forward you have to talk about. So this is a diplomatic step. Other than that, and you can also talk about, in certain cases, dialogue. Now this dialogue can be as forms of confidence building measures, और जरूरी नहीं हम इसी sequence में लिखें, depending on the topic and the country we can change the sequence. Dialogue can be confidence building measures, and dialogues can also happen at multilateral institutions. बहुत बार क्या होता है, the conditions are not very good, bilateral talks नहीं हो रही हैं. Societies by, for example, BRICS, SCO, G20, other platforms can be used to talk. Now, other way forward in that sense can be the common points that we saw. If possible, increase the strategic cooperation. Right? अब जैसे with USA, everybody is saying economics has come in the way of security and strategic concerns. They were doing very well on the Indo-Pacific front. अब उसके बीच में क्या आ गया? Tariffs. So when I say strategic cooperation, because strategic is what? Long term, right? So strategic cooperation can happen. Now this can be a vision. For example, India has a deep vision for Indo-Pacific. So India will participate with like-minded countries. जैसे we have Quad. Yes or no? Quad सुना है हमने? Which countries are there in Quad? India, USA, Japan, Australia, right? So you can go for strategic cooperation. If other than that, what would help you? Again, economic engagement. So वो जो problems हमने देखी, if there are stalled projects, work on stalled projects, increase the investment, reduce the deficit. Okay, and basically also diversify. जैसे for example, for India and Russia, major component is defense. So we say that India and Russia now diversify their economic engagement. There should be more areas of cooperation. Okay, these are some ideas on how we can think about improving the relations with countries. Other than that, one element which will always be there, again kind of a low-hanging fruit for us, is people to people ties, or again the cultural element. And this is again generally a framework which you will find, that how to improve things diplomatically, right? How dialogue can be better, how strategic, economic and people to people ties can be better. इसी का ही variation आपको बाबा अपने handout में दिखेगा with other countries. Now I can change this to, जैसे अभी हम देखेंगे जब India and US tariff wars, उसमें I have used a framework immediate, medium term, long term. Then in case of Nepal and India, what we have done, what Nepal can do and what India can do, दोनों को अलग कर दिया. Idea पर ही समझो, idea almost इसी lines में होगा. ठीक है। ट्रैक 2 नहीं, डिप्लोमेट्स विल बी द पार्ट ऑफ गवर्नमेंट ओनली, वो ट्रैक 1 में आएंगे। ट्रैक 2 में द पीपल ऑफ लेट्स से द रिटायर्ड नॉन गवर्नमेंट पीपल, राइट। नाउ वे फॉरवर्ड में फर्स्ट सी द हेडिंग्स नाउ। फर्स्ट इज डिप्लोमैटिक, सेकंड इज ऑन बॉर्डर्स व्हाट वी कैन डू, देन इकोनॉमिक, देन रीजनल, देन कल्चरल। अब इसमें जो पॉइंट्स आएंगे आपके, these points again are a reflection of how well you have done a topic and how thorough are with your facts, ठीक है। तो जब भी आप पहली बार when you see this document for the first time, don't be overwhelmed because यहाँ पे हर एक चीज that you find in various magazines and topics are there at one page, fine। So your idea is first to understand अच्छा dimension क्या होते हैं। अगर मुझे सोचना पड़ा और ऐसा सवाल आया, बहुत बार क्या होगा, you don't have scope to write 5 dimensions, but if the question is like that, a question is very let's say on the spot, that how can India and China relations be reimagined, अब आपके पास 5 dimensions में लिखने का scope है, fine। Now diplomatic, now let's see, institutionalize, special representative talks, okay, the working mechanism, consultative groups, hotlines, resume suspended forums like a defense secretary dialogue, and when you make short notes out of this for each dimension, if you even if you remember 1 or 2 points, that is more than enough, fine। अब ये सारे अच्छे कीवर्ड्स हैं, क्राइसिस डी एस्केलेशन प्रोटोकॉल्स, राइट। जैसे अभी हुआ था LAC इंसिडेंट सिमुलेशन एक्सरसाइजेस हो, whenever there is a crisis, how to de-escalate it so that ultimately you don't lose people on the borders. Then for border management we can talk about infrastructure, fast track करना, roads, who creates roads here, border roads organization, advanced landing grounds है, surveillance है। So this is more in terms of security, create buffer zones, demilitarization points. The more demilitarization we do, that is better, yes or no। high altitude combat preparedness, Predator drones है, mountain warfare, ये आप देख रहे हो, this is more from a security standpoint, you're wanting to increase। Somebody was asking me again, sir, how is realism seen right now? This is again showing you realism. While we are talking of dialogue, we are not reducing our security, in fact we are making it even better, better technology, yes or no। अब आओ economic पे, this time also now we have seen, now things will make a lot of sense। diversify supply chains through, इसको underline करो, what is the meaning of China plus 1, create an alternate, as simple as that। if China is losing out the market, India can take the space। restrict FDI in sensitive sectors, yes or no। incentivize domestic production in semiconductors, this is important because who is the leader of semiconductors, China, so we want to do that। APIs, what is API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, ठीक है। तो PLI, India Semiconductor Mission, we can mention this। now cyber security is also an important element, so CERT-in is the institutional body, right। data protection, AI, some of these elements on the economic front। तो इसमें आप देख के रहे हो ओवरऑल कीवर्ड्स हमारे लिए क्या हो गए, डाइवर्सिफाई एंड सेल्फ reliance। Specific things are certain keywords, so if you know the scheme you can write the scheme, but first whenever you're doing a country, क्योंकि we are going to cover the entire IR in one class, fine, तो ऐसा नहीं होगा आपको हर चीज का हर स्पेसिफिक हर एग्जांपल सबको याद हो जाएगा। तो फर्स्ट फोकस ऑन द कोर dimensions and ideas, and the specific points, the more you revise them, that will make sense। इसलिए I'm not focusing too much on the very specific keywords की इतने fact पे इतने डॉलर है, that with time you will get better at it, right। so even if you don't know how much trade deficit we have right now, no issues, but you should know we have a trade deficit, yes। now regional पे of course there are many institutions with which we can engage in, ठीक है। अब this is the important point, इसको लगाओ स्टार मार्क, Quad, BIMSTEC, IORA, we are building partnerships through them। Quad is one, we'll again see Quad today in Indo-Pacific, there is BIMSTEC, IOR is Indian Ocean Rim Association, Sagar and Mahasagar strategies, Maha में कुछ नहीं, mutual and holistic, that is Mahasagar, and Mahasagar, see Sagar is only talking about India's neighborhood, Indian Ocean, Mahasagar includes the global south, that is why it is broader in sense, We can again lead initiatives like International Solar Alliance, climate diplomacy to shape multilateral norms. Okay. Now, at the cultural level, what can we do? Now, revive educational. Now, this will be very common and easy to understand. Yes or no? Cultural में जैसे कि educational, water sharing exchanges, Buddhism, Ayurveda, broadly, people to people, education, people to people can also be through exchange of students. Yes. This will also related to India's soft power. Both of them are leveraging the soft power. Can we say this? So this is again going to be an important part. ठीक है? Now, अब देखो इसको. Just read this once and just see how a conclusion is made. Despite episodes of trust deficit, we have seen the trust deficit at various accounts. Yes. The idea of elephant dragon tango that reflects the aspirational vision of peaceful coexistence between two Asian giants. Up India must walk a fine line. इसको underline करो. Engage but hedge. What is the meaning? What is the meaning of hedge? सुना आपने hedge your bets. आप engage कर रहे हो, but at the same time you should also have your alternatives ready, right? Second is cooperate but compete. Especially when we say tariff or trade wars, you may have to compete with them. And when you compete, India is competing on its own terms, on its own values. If China is giving debt trap diplomacy, we'll give a more developmental model. Yes? ये सारी चीजें अभी हम आगे अफ्रीका में और other countries में देखेंगे. That PM Modi talks about 10-point plan of India-Africa cooperation. उसमें आधे points का indirect reference is on China. Right? So now you can use some impactful words. Engage but hedge. Cooperate but compete, as it reclaims the place in the Asian century. The idea of elephant dragon tango. तो अगर question आए Asian century का, we can use this. If you go for a more realistic thing, then you go for this. Engage but hedge, cooperate but compete. अगर आप सिर्फ engage and cooperate कर रहे हो, that means idealism. You're balancing idealism with practicality. You're hedging as well as competing. कह सकते हैं? Okay. Now we'll do one more topic and then we'll take a break. एक बार इसको देख लेते हैं. People online. अब देखते हैं. देखो, US China trade war, one of the most talked about topics, and this topic will also help you understand the India US trade and tariff war, which also we'll do in India US. अब देखते हैं. Just see the very first line, very impactful line. When two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. And UPSC sometimes has the habit, इसी तरह से quotes को वो essay में डाल देगी. अब आप सोचो. Fine. African proverb, it is the grass that suffers. What is the meaning of this? ठीक है, small suffers, right? Everybody will also suffer as a consequence. Fine. So that means, yes, there will be a lot of collateral damage. And basic point is, and in this, that we will also see that जो tariff war है, the tariff war is not just about economics. There are hidden strategic ambitions also, which we again unpacked. Now, होता क्या है trade war? Tit for tat tariffs between nations to counter unfair practices. Now, this is going to disrupt global supply chain, makes sense? It raises production cost and slows down economic growth. Now, whenever you see a trade war is happening, you should also write यहाँ पे, it means decline of WTO. WTO was there to ensure free and fair trade, yes or no? But if this is happening and between two proper giants, economic giants, what does it tell you? The role of multilateral institutions is declining. And the two big nations are trying to call their shots, yes or no? Number one. Ab, let's quickly see the timeline and then you will understand why this is happening. इसमें geopolitics भी है काफी, again global impact, and again it is structured in a manner, this will help you understand better. Now, first of all, this trade war is not new. I've told you this was there in Trump 1.0 also. Fine. Trump had initiated tariffs way back. थोड़ा सा इसको पढ़ लेंगे. What was happening? You don't have to cram this. Right? Citing IP theft and trade imbalance. What is IP theft? Intellectual property. Now, US has been vocal of IP theft by China, and they are also critical of India. India is also put sometimes in a special list. कौन सी list है? Which list? एक और कोई list है. नहीं, वो अलग है. That is different. आसपास 301. हाँ, there is a special watch list. We'll also see that. IP theft है. What is the IP theft? Intellectual property, right? They have been critical. And second, trade imbalance, which is why US says that while China has been a beneficiary of globalization, China has not done enough for globalization. पहला issue. Tariffs आए, 10% reciprocal tariffs. China retaliates, hiking it from huge number, 84 से सीधे 125. So both of them are reciprocating. Now USA did not think that China will reciprocate, which is why this got escalated. उनको लगा हम बढ़ा देंगे tariff और चीजें चलेंगी. Right? And China also knew that USA has huge level of dependence. They cannot do much about semiconductors, all the chips. So they knew that they can actually increase it, which is why USA, after some time, Trump had to take a step back. तो उन्होंने बोला नहीं चलिए ट्रेड कर लेते हैं, etc. And he has this habit, right? He has a very transactional approach. We also see that. Yes or no? Now, India was also impacted. Steel or aluminiums. यहाँ पे GSP लिखा, you can write this as Generalized System of Preferences. This was withdrawn. Generalized System of Preferences. And mainly India was also impacted. And not just India, this will be seen globally also there was an impact. Fine. Now, what were the core triggers? Number one, there was a trade imbalance. सबसे important ये है. Huge trade imbalance if we see between USA and China, huge deficit. And this is one of the main reasons that USA wanted to reduce its deficit. First of all, USA also has a huge level of dependence. Fine, number one. दूसरा क्या issue है? IPR and tech transfer. So acquisition of unfair tech practices by China. Number one, they do not transfer IP, they steal the IP. Second is tech transfer. बहुत बार क्या होगा? They will not share the technology. Okay? And they will again steal the patents. So this discontent was rising. Fine. आपको ये भी पता होगा that China is expert in copying and sometimes they do such good reverse engineering. वो उससे भी better बना देते हैं, right? And even at a cheaper price. Then underline this keyword. ये terms use करो. Supply chain decoupling. Now, USA has created a CHIPS Act, which helps USA to diversify. Compact is there with India and USA. अभी जो tariffs पढ़े तो उसमें articles में आपने सुना होगा compact के बारे में. That how will compact be? So I'll tell you compact when I do India and USA. So with the CHIPS Act, USA wanted to diversify beyond China. It wanted to look to Vietnam and other markets. Okay, so even that is there. And another important point here is geopolitics. The moment you see Taiwan, what is Taiwan a leader in? Semiconductors. Fine. With Taiwan, remember, China says that there is a one China policy. What does that mean? That Taiwan is an integral part of China, and if you have to talk with China, sorry, if you have to talk with Taiwan, you should talk to China. What does US do? It will have a direct contact with Taiwan. And Taiwan wants its own autonomy and independence. तो ये एक pressing issue बन जाता है. इसलिए we are seeing this as core trigger. So one core trigger is huge trade deficit. Other than that, IPR and tech transfer issues हैं. USA already trying to decouple. Decouple का मतलब पता है आपको? Something that is engaged, you want to disengage. Strategic decoupling. One is Taiwan. One is South China Sea. What is happening in South China Sea? We saw 9-dash line. We also saw, so within 9-dash line, be it with Vietnam, okay, Philippines, okay, Indonesia, with many other countries, there is a dispute that is happening. Even that is a challenge. Fine. Dusra, there is AI and quantum supremacy. This I was telling you in terms of technology. So China is not only leading in economy, China is also leading in technology, which is also motivation. बहुत बार क्या आपने ट्रेड वॉर लगाया, you just want to stop the growth of a nation for certain time, yes or no? And lastly, there is a case of tariff evasion, that China reroutes tariffs via Vietnam or Malaysia sometimes to evade certain tariffs. So combination of these factors ultimately culminated into what you see as a, so अगर एक सवाल आए that trade war is purely guided by trade, it is not true. Trade war has other ambitions. There is a technological race and there is also a geopolitical race. Who is going to be having the most power? So trade is never economic, ये आप याद रखो. और IR में भी whatever meets the eye, there are things beyond that also, right? Now, what is the global impact? And we'll also see impact on India. Global impact है, of course, there will be recession. Both USA and China, they have almost 43% of the global GDP, and according to WTO, around 7% of the GDP may get hit. Fine. Just see the headings here. Market हो जाएगी volatile. There will be a flight of capital. पढ़ते हैं, right? क्यों? There is uncertainty, and investment cannot go with uncertainty, right? There can be inflations, because if the prices are high, again think of supply and demand, right? Limited money if it is chasing certain goods. So tariff will raise the price, can lead to inflation. Underline or star mark this also, ये मत भूलो. अब देखो यहाँ पे हम क्या कह रहे हैं? Weaponization of rare earths, EVs and supply chains. This is again a global impact. Because the moment you stop China, China already knows it has a dominance in rare earth, वो रोक देगा. अब आप क्या करोगे? So there will be a technological cold war. This can also happen, yes. That is why USA is now very much insistent on a CHIPS Act and trying to diversify other sources, because there is a huge dependence on China. And if there is an escalation, it may also become a full-fledged cold war. Now, this was always a challenge with China. आपने सुना है ना dumping? You've seen anti-dumping duties, countervailing duties, etc. So what is the dumping risk? China manufactures a lot at a competitive price. If it dumps it in a local economy, what will happen? It will crash. All right, there will be too many goods of Chinese. So the domestic players cannot compete with that, right? This can be a challenge. So China के पास अगर आप नहीं ले रहे हो China से, China can flood some of the markets with its own dumping. That is a challenge, right? And last is another important point. You may think of these points, maybe you miss polarization. It means people's या nations' trust on a rules-based order, on multilateralism will decline. So this is going to weaken multilateralism. The global trade agreements, because trade agreement किस पे based होते हैं? Trust पे. Both the parties will agree. But if the parties are just changing tariffs, that is why unilateral actions are never appreciated. If you discuss, then you change both of the countries, then it's fine. But if USA changes it, maybe other countries start to change it. So trade हो ही नहीं पाएगा. This is the challenge, right? Now, if you come to India's side, what will be the impact of this on India? क्या impact होगा हमारे पे? दोनों हैं. तो कभी भी, so one is negative. Number one, there will be a disruption of supply chain. So we already know 70 or almost 80% of APIs are from China. So number one, electronics, pharma, all these sectors will take a hit. That is why it is said when two elephant fights, what suffers? The grass suffers, right? There's a growth dip also. Goes without saying, if there is inflation, etc. The growth, there is a recession, there is a slowdown. So growth will also suffer, right? थोड़े से facts देख सकते हो, don't have to remember it exactly. Inflation होगा, imports are costly, and India, in this case, we import a lot. This can lead to more inflation. This will be a challenge. And financial markets में क्या issue होगा? FPI, etc. may move out if there is instability. So rupee may fall. Financial markets can also have a decline. This is the negative. This is true. What will be the positive? ये भी होगा. पहली चीज क्या होगी positive in this? Yes, we have exports, but very good point is we can also have an alternative. Right? If China is losing out certain markets, does it give India the space to use those markets? Yes. जैसे कि चलो Indian textiles, there are some exports because trade is getting diversified. Same agriculture, so soybean exports to China, they have increased and India can trade with both of them. So we are in a pact that we cannot trade with China or we cannot trade with USA. So for us, it is again a good market to diversify and become an alternative. So one is agriculture boost, yes, export gains. And then Chinese tech firms may see a backlash. Indian tech firms may still get more options. We can also say this. So tech outsourcing, etc. This can also be one. Way forward क्या है? दोनों चीजें हैं. देखो, one is global solutions, what do you want, and you also want an India strategy. ये सारे points हम इसमें भी लिख सकते हैं. Say this year there was a question on the increased economic nationalism. What can India do? Right? I can use some of these points how to improve in the Indian economic, let's say, front. So, global solutions देखते हैं. One is revive WTO's appellate body, which is Dispute Settlement Board, by diplomacy or by other mechanisms. If WTO is revived, what will happen? At least WTO can interfere, right? Rules-based order at least हो सकता है. दूसरा, you want to promote South-South trade. See, USA and China are dominant players. इनसे impact क्या होगा? छोटे players. We say grasses. It is the South-South cooperation that is impacted. So you want to improve South-South. आपको पता ना North and South? Who created this North and South? किसी ने बोला line. कौन सी line है? Right. It's a Brandt line. Okay. The name of the economist. North and South. ये line कोई exist करती नहीं है. This is only what? Right. And you can also argue that this is not the most rational way to talk in North है South है. ठीक है? South here represents the developing countries. North is developed. Fine. And strengthen other institutions so that de-escalation हो पाए. In China we saw crisis de-escalation frameworks bilateral में. अगर ये चीज globally होती है, you should also have de-escalation frameworks so that things don't go into escalatory, retaliatory tariffs. अब ये normative चीज है. Normative पता है आपको? These are only ideals. कुछ solutions हैं. जरूरी नहीं है exactly ऐसा हो, but we can write them as points. So we can revive WTO, that is the idea. We can engage with other blocks and we can go for South-South trade. That is the main point. In terms of India's strategy, what we can say? What can India do? जैसे कि we can fast track FTAs. What are FTAs? We already know. Free trade with EU, with other blocks, so that you want to diversify the export markets. PLI schemes for chips. What is PLI? Production linked incentive schemes for chips, for APIs, etc. अब देखो ये इसको फिर से अंडरलाइन करो. China plus one is what? Alternative. हाँ, good point. Apple is moving to India from China. Also, there are some other lines, points. So PM Gati Shakti, Invest India. Now, we can also have a trade watchdog. जैसे बोला जाता है बहुत बार, Ministry of Commerce and Industry can make certain changes so that you get tariff alerts. We get, if there is somebody who's rerouting it, we get some detection. This can also be made. जैसे if somebody is wanting to avoid tariff, they can go for rerouting. तो पता चल जाए something is being rerouted, right? Lastly, Quad या BRICS to advocate. ये भी term use कर सकते हो. Non-politicization of supply chains. All right. Now, just see the last line. A trade war has rarely true winners, only shifting costs, which means ultimately trade war will be expensive for all the parties involved. Okay. Now, after break, we'll begin the Gen Z protest. Nepal. Okay, we'll start with this. ठीक है? It is 1:55 now. DSP is Dispute Settlement Board. अच्छा, अभी it is 1:55. If you have any doubts, हैं किसी के अभी? The doubt is only the lunch break. कितनी देर का है? See, if there's a dispute settlement board, it will help. So now, see, people, हम मिलते हैं. At what time should we meet? 3. कुछ ज़्यादा जल्दी नहीं है. We should meet around 6. ज़्यादा better होगा. No, it is 1:55. I did not give you break at. ठीक है. If there are doubts, I am here. People online, you can also text if you have doubts. We will resume with India, Nepal, post break. See, Brandt line is a line that divides global north and global south.